Chapter 883. Host has completed the mission and gained 30 days of life points. Received an additional side mission sympathy reward of 20 days of life points, a total of 560 days. Deducting 1 life subsistence allowance for 5 days, 5 days for the Flower as Jade sticker, 5 days for the system instant noodles, 5 days for the popcorn, 10 days for the painkiller. 130 life stickers, specially approved to receive the main system's wholesale price, 50 days of life points. Remaining 480 days of life points. External life points can be accommodated for 800 days. Wei Wei Bai was startled awake by the deduction of life points. She knew that there were many stickers used. But she hadn't thought of so many. The first time she used stickers in the previous plane, 3 stickers cost 15 days. If she hadn't received the wholesale price, her 1 year of life points wouldn't have been enough to deduct the number of bed times in Chi Chimu's plane. Sure enough, to live, she had to stay away from the bed. How much life points had she spent in a year and a half's time? If she hadn't had Yi Yuxuan, she would have died long ago. The system said happily, "Wholesale price, the first time I've seen the wholesale price. I heard that only when the quantity is large enough can there be a wholesale price. Next time, fight again and see if you can get a few more wholesale prices." After all, the wholesale price was discounted. It was cheaper than the supermarket cleaning up expired food. Wei Wei Bai's face turned white. There was still a next time. The next time the target dared to pull her into bed, she would strangle them to death. 50 days of life points even if it was the wholesale price, it was so expensive that her heart twitched. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to look at Yi Yuxuan. She had to look at his shiny face. Her wounded heart would heal. Was there any host as miserable as her? Life or death, in the end, she had to pay the life points. Was it easy for her to live? Wei Wei Bai got up from the bed and suddenly felt that something was wrong. Walala, she raised her hand and saw a thin silver chain around her wrist. Her wrist was white, and the light blue blood vessels were visible. The delicate silver chain was even more conspicuous. Wei Wei Bai was speechless for a moment and silently lay back down. "Hey, System Smash, am I still in the realm?" She clearly saw herself lying on the bed in her own room. Why was he imprisoned? This was completely illogical. He must still be dreaming. It was better to continue sleeping. The system said, "Wake up, Yi Yuxuan is still grieving over at the balcony, her health points are calling for you." Wei Wei Bai asked, "Where's my dad?" With her father around, it was impossible for him to chain her up. The system said, "The male lead sent him to America to find a doctor." Wei Wei Bai, "Where is Qin Chou?" The system said, "He followed your father to find a doctor." Wei Wei Bai frowned. "Did something terrible happen to my body? So you want to lock me up and let everyone go to the doctor?" The system said, "No, it's just that the male lead wants to have you all to himself. That's why he found a reason to send your doctor and your old father away. Then, he chained you, who wouldn't resist, to appease his restless heart." Wei Wei Bai said, "I'll sleep for 3 days. 3 days ago, weren't we still sweetly watching a movie?" Yi Yuxuan's 3 days and her 1.5 years. Why did it feel like they were not in the same dimension? She was the one who had experienced more things, but she realized that the speed of Yi Yuxuan's schizophrenia was not something she could catch up to. The system really did not know how to smooth things over. Yi Yuxuan was getting more and more affected by the plane. It was worried that Yi Yuxuan would not be able to take it and directly cause schizophrenia. Chapter 884. Fortunately, Yi Yuxuan, who represented reason in reality, was strong enough. Otherwise, it wouldn't be enough to be abused by Wei Wei Bai. Yi Yuxuan heard the sound of the chain, and his heart couldn't help but throb with pain. He didn't turn around, but stood quietly on the balcony, a cigarette in his hand. His eyes sometimes twisted with struggle, sometimes sober and rational. More than that, it was a crazy obsession. He knew that something was wrong with him. Moreover, his originally calm temperament was gradually sliding into a huge vortex that he couldn't control. That black hole was the sense of insecurity of losing Wei Wei Bai. Now that he was away from Wei Wei Bai for a few seconds, he wished he could tie her up, for fear that if he looked away, she would be gone. It wasn't normal. He had already used all his strength to suppress and analyze his feelings. But for the first time, he felt powerless. He saw the ash fall to the ground, and his head suddenly hurt. His body trembled as he supported himself on the edge of the balcony. The scene in the dream was like a viscous vortex, constantly spinning and pulling him in. It pulled him completely into the dream, the most painful scene after losing her. Reborn young master's delicate cousin follow-up, everyone in the Bai family trembled. The bluestone road outside the door was stained with the blood of the Bai family. Madame Bai trembled as she brought over the tea, saying in a low voice, "Chi Darren, please have some tea." Chi Chimu silently looked at the white orchids outside the window. This was Wei Wei Bai's boudoir. After her death, this room was sealed up by Madame Bai. Madame Bai and the fifth prince were in cahoots. Before the third prince ascended the throne, she had secretly contacted the fifth prince. Even when Wei Wei Bai ate the 5-step powder, the fifth prince used all his family members to threaten Wei Wei Bai to kill him. It was also Madame Bai's own plan. Just to surrender to the fifth prince. Chi Chimu unhurriedly took the tea, his movements neither fast nor slow as he used the lid to scrape the foam from the tea. The poison had been switched. After all, Wei Wei Bai's orchid fragrance was so special. There was no one else in the world who was the same. Thinking of this, his expression became absent-minded for a moment, and his heart began to ache. To alleviate this pain, he said faintly, "Pull one more and kill it." 2 soldiers appeared and immediately pulled one of the Bai clansmen out. "Sister, save me. Save me. I don't want to die." The one who was dragged out was Madame Bai's younger brother. Madame Bai trembled and her legs almost gave out. She immediately sat on the ground. She implored Chi Chimu, "In the past, I was blind and blinded to treat you like that. Moreover, I also didn't know that the fifth prince would be so cruel. He told me that he wouldn't take Wei Wei's life, so I helped him deceive Wei Wei. But he didn't expect the fifth prince to poison him. He never thought that Wei Wei Bai would rather die than poison Chi Chimu. If he had let her return that day and poison Chi Chimu to death, she would be able to rush back immediately and get the antidote. But when the sun came up, she didn't see her daughter come back. At that time, she felt uneasy. Only when she returned did she find out that Wei Wei Bai had died. Chi Chimu locked himself up for a day before emerging with Wei Wei Bai's corpse in his arms. Then he held a funeral for Wei Wei Bai as usual, insisting on burying Wei Wei Bai in the Qi family's graveyard. Madame Bai didn't dare to say anything because of her guilty conscience. But everything that happened next caused the entire situation to spiral out of control. The old emperor died, and the third prince inherited the throne. The fifth prince and the crown prince were imprisoned. All the losers who were involved in this battle were dead. Download the mobile article at https://m/sashu.com there. Chapter 885. Even the fifth prince died in less than half a month in the Forbidden Land. It was said that he died very miserably, as if he was tortured to death. Madame Bai worried day and night, but in the end, she couldn't escape. Early this morning, Chi Chimu led people to surround the entire Bai family. Then he killed a person every once in a while. Without giving any reason, he directly started killing. This kind of pressure caused many people to directly collapse. Chichimu didn't pay too much attention to Madame Bai, who was paralyzed on the ground and begging for mercy. His expression was cold, his eyes empty. When he swept his gaze over the dressing table, there was a hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. There seemed to be a girl with a thin back, long hair hanging to her waist, and a sleepy face sitting there. She seemed to be holding powder to apply it to herself, but couldn't do it properly. She could only throw away the powder and willfully and arrogantly order the people around her. Chichimu, what are you still looking at? I like the flowers you drew. Why aren't you coming over to draw for me? Chichimu stared blankly at her, his smile unconsciously deepening. But his eyes were tired and miserable. Madame Bai saw him smile, and her mind suddenly flashed with inspiration. Sir Chi, I am sorry, but on account of me being Weiwei's mother, please spare our lives. Don't you like Weiwei so much? Chichimu's empty and drifting eyes finally had some substance. He lowered his eyes, looking at her without any emotion. Then he gently nodded and said with a sigh, You also know that I like her. It's a pity that she is no longer here. When she was here, he even had thoughts of giving up on dealing with the Bai family, this malignant tumor. Unfortunately, Weiwei Bai was no longer here. Madame Bai repeatedly said, but this is still Weiwei's home. Before she could finish, the poison tea in Chichimu's hand was quietly poured over her head. Madame Bai was startled, then suddenly screamed and immediately dug out the antidote from her clothes. This kind of medicine was colorless and tasteless. She had obtained it from the dead fifth prince. Even if one touched their skin, they would be poisoned to death. She had long thrown caution to the wind, knowing that Chichimu wouldn't let her family go. So she first showed weakness and then coaxed Chichimu to drink the tea. Once Chichimu died, they would flee to the neighboring country and have a slim chance of survival. But she didn't expect that Chichimu would directly pour the tea over her head. Madame Bai took out the antidote and was about to put it into her mouth. A foot ruthlessly stomped down, precisely landing on Madame Bai's hand. He crushed her hand and the antidote under his feet. The sound of bones breaking could be heard. It sent chills down one's spine. Madame Bai screamed. Chichimu watched expressionlessly as he threw the teacup at Madame Bai. Then he stood up and kicked Madame Bai away. The poison in Madame Bai's body had already taken effect. The poison was highly toxic, and her skin began to fester. It looked terrifying and mournful. Chichimu's heart was unperturbed. He originally thought that revenge would make him feel better. But he was still dispirited. Chichimu said in a tired and bored voice, Kill them all, then throw the corpses into the mass grave to feed the dogs. As for the Bai family, burn it. Nothing here was good enough for Weiwei Bai. Even if it was the place where she lived. He wasn't willing to sully his wife in this place. After Chichimu walked out of the Bai family, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. He clutched at his chest in heart-rending pain. His eyes were about to burst as he gasped for breath. Chichimu powerlessly opened his mouth, as though he was howling in pain. His legs trembled as he walked, and his tears fell along with him. There. Chapter 886. This was the first time he cried after Weiwei Bai was buried. He didn't even know how he had endured so many days. Every day, when he woke up, he didn't dare to open his eyes. The empty pillow made him incomparably suffocate. He had clearly lived very well in his previous life. No matter how lonely a person was, no matter how many hardships he had experienced, it had never hurt to the point of despair. In this life, everything had clearly gone smoothly. The third prince had ascended the throne ahead of time. He had rushed out of the court examination ahead of time and was made the top scorer by the imperial brush. The Qi family's wealth hadn't been touched. In the future, his official career would be smooth, and no one would be able to stop him from having a bright future. He should even ride a horse now and parade through the streets to admire the flowers with the group of grand scholars who had passed the court examination. His life should have been so good. It was just missing a Wei Bai. It was just missing her. Why couldn't it work? Qi Chimu thought he could hold on. After all, he had passed through all kinds of desperate situations, even the impossible of rebirth. What reason did he have to not hold on and live a good life? Even before she died, she wanted him to live a good life. He had agreed. But, why couldn't it work? Qi Chimu gritted his teeth and endured, tears streaming down his face. He had lied to her. He couldn't live happily at all. He didn't even have a heart. How could he be happy? Another winter, Qi Chimu resigned from his position in the court. 3 years of brilliant official career. He had only wanted to give her a title. He was plagued by illness. The imperial physician told him that his heart was ill to the bone and he was overly worried. If he couldn't resolve himself, he wouldn't have long to live. A serious illness in the early spring completely destroyed his body. He estimated that he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Qi Chimu coughed, weakly burning paper money for Wei Bai. He said gently, "This life, I estimate that it will be like this. I won't live for many years, and I won't be happy for many days." Speaking to this point, he finally revealed a sincere smile. "This is also good. Suicide is too cowardly, and living is too hard. It's not bad to die earlier." Qi Chimu's face was deathly pale, but his smile remained. "Someone as impatient as you might have already reincarnated. I don't know if I'll be able to catch up to your next life. I'm afraid I'll be reborn again." After his rebirth, everything began anew. But after her rebirth, she might not be the same as she was in this life. He was afraid that he wouldn't meet her. Qi Chimu sighed. "Meeting you is truly a sin. I don't know what I owe you, this little heartless one. You've made me suffer." He should have been filled with glory and splendor, a life of wealth. She had brought him a life of loneliness and suffering. However, he still felt happy. There was nothing he could do about it. Everything she gave him was good. Even if it was lovesickness that seeped into one's bones, or if it was a life-threatening illness, it was fine. Even after she died, he was still willing to pamper and miss her. As a person of 2 lifetimes, he couldn't compare to her 1 year of companionship. Qi Chimu coughed up blood and said with a smile, Wei, I also hurt very much." The wind and snow gradually grew heavier, and Qi Chimu sat through the night. After he returned, his body completely collapsed. He endured for 3 days and missed her for the rest of his life. Then, he died. He promised her to live a good life. But he lied to her. He had to hurry to the underworld to find her and apologize. When the time came, he would allow her to beat and scold him or kneel on the abacus. He only asked to be able to wash her feet again, or draw a flower between her brows for her. If she still didn't forgive him, he would tie himself up again and let her do as she pleased. She was a bit selfish, but her heart was soft. No matter how low he was, as low as the dust, she would always love him. /the Chapter 887. Wei Bai couldn't take it anymore. Her voice trembled as she said, "Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I just want to kiss you." Yi Yuxuan's tone was calm, but his voice was hoarse and magnetic. It pulled at her eardrums and made her ears itch. And his words made Wei Bai, who had always been thick-skinned, feel a little shy. She coughed lightly. "Unchain me and I'll let you kiss me as much as you want." Yi Yuxuan looked at her armed expression and a sharp sense of danger flashed in his eyes. No, let's just lock it up. You have too many motives. I'm a little scared. Scared? If someone else said that they were scared, Wei Wei Bai might sympathize and give them a thumbs up. But Yi Yuxuan said that he was scared. This was a big problem. Yi Yuxuan was perennially paralyzed with constipation and an unbreakable heart of stone. He was scared too. Wei Wei Bai carefully shifted her body and her smile was a little stiff. Yi Yuxuan, you have to know that my feelings for you are very pure. Don't think too much. I just want to cheat you of your life points. She didn't dare to ask for anything else. Yi Yuxuan pursed his lips slightly and revealed an expression that was like a smile yet not a smile. This expression was rare. To be exact, it was rare for any expression to appear on his face. He put his fingers on the chain on her wrist. He touched her blood vessels and then said softly, "You are indeed very pure to me, but you don't have any feelings for me." This sentence caused a ripple. It made Wei Wei Bai's mind clear up for a moment. For a second, her expression almost changed. She felt that Yi Yuxuan was much more superior than her. She calmed down. This guy was so hard to fool. It was useless to say that she liked him. Yi Yuxuan lowered her head and felt the blood vessels on her wrist. Your pulse isn't fast. Even if it's occasionally rapid, it's because you're nervous and guilty. Even your heartbeat has nothing to do with emotional fluctuations. It's just a biological instinct. He had trained before, and it was a very standard elite training method. He knew much more about the human body than she did. He could even see their micro-expressions clearly. Every time she lied, there would be a moment where she had to pretend. Wei Wei Bai couldn't pretend anymore. No matter how good her acting was, she couldn't control her heartbeat and pulse. Unless, of course, Slagstem was using cheats. Thinking of this, Wei Wei Bai tried to call the system. Give me an idiot hack and make Yi Yuxuan's IQ drop by 100. How am I going to let him see if my pulse and heartbeat are fast? The system glanced at Yi Yuxuan in fear. It shivered and poked its head out from behind the trash can. His aura is similar to yours. Mental retardation cheats usually attack indiscriminately. Once the mental retardation cheat is activated, you'll also lose 100 points. Moreover, it didn't dare to use the cheat in front of Yi Yuxuan. Yi Yuxuan seemed to be a little bit awakened. It didn't dare to imagine how miserable its fate would be when Yi Yuxuan fully awakens. It didn't even dare to speak now. How could it use the cheat? Wei Wei Bai said. Trash system, what's the use of having you? System said. Trash host, if you have the ability to rely on the system, why don't you have the ability to do it yourself and use the cheat? To be honest, even if Yi Yuxuan's IQ drops by 100, he'll still be higher than you. The favored son of heaven was a Jack-Su super halo that would destroy the heavens and destroy the earth. It could mess with anyone, but it couldn't mess with Yi Yuxuan. Wei Wei Bai thought, system, this trash, spit out what you ate, and return what you used. We're done. She was just about to curse the trash system. Her chin was lifted by someone, and Yi Yuxuan kissed her lightly. Chapter 888. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes fluttered, and her breathing became erratic. After he exposed her disguise, she could not be as calm as before. Yi Yuxuan said, Don't worry, there's no point in lying to me. I'm naturally sensitive to other people's emotions. Because he was not a normal person, he was completely lacking in emotions. So to know what others were thinking, he observed other people's expressions since he was young to guess what they were thinking. So he knew even if she lied to him. Wei Wei Bai looked at him calmly. In fact, her heart was in a mess. This kind of atmosphere was similar to when a real big shot came and smacked her to the ground with a fly swatter when she was about to fly high in the sky. She suddenly said, "Yes, Yi Yuxuan, I don't like you. Even if you're handsome, rich, and an old virgin, I still don't like you." These words were heartbreaking. The system notification said, "This sentence increased by 30 days. Emotional fluctuations, even if it was uncomfortable, could increase one's lifespan." Yi Yuxuan was undoubtedly uncomfortable. But his expression was still paralyzed and did not change much. Then he kissed her gently. After the kiss, he said, "I'm in a bit of pain here, give me a kiss to calm me down." Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. She knew that Yi Yuxuan was not the kind of guy who could be fooled. She suddenly said to the system, "When he kissed me, did my lifespan increase?" The system said, "No." As expected, he knew that she was lying to him. So Yi Yuxuan started to restrain his emotional fluctuations towards her. She could still gain lifespan now, but one day, Yi Yuxuan would be tired of this kind of deceitful relationship. At that time, he might completely shut off his emotional channel towards her. Wei Wei Bai struggled in her heart. She breathed heavily. There was no emotional shield in reality, and her current state was not suitable for liking anyone. But she was going to lose her life. Feelings were not that important. Wei Wei Bai bit her lip, her fingers clenched, and suddenly she reached out to pinch Yi Yuxuan's face. She no longer pretended to be angry and directly exposed her fangs. "Yi Yuxuan, listen to me, you old virgin with a facial nerve disorder. I've hated you since the beginning." Yi Yuxuan stared blankly for a moment before she vaguely nodded. It was as if he already knew about it. Bai Weiwei wasn't polite with him. Her fingers exerted force and pinched his face red. "Look at you. You put on an icy face every day. Who are you trying to scare? I have a weak heart, do you know that?" Yi Yuxuan's face was pinched by her, and he looked somewhat comically calm. A trace of hesitation flashed through his eyes. "Did I scare you?" Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth. "Nonsense, do you remember the first time I took the initiative to look for you? At that time, I sat in the reception room of your company for an entire day. You were having a good time in the meeting and ignored me for an entire day. When you were done with the meeting, you walked out directly and didn't even look at me." Her father's company was a little small. It couldn't be compared to a giant like the Yi family. She heard that her photo had been chosen by Yi Yuxuan. Her father was overjoyed. She was also curious about her fiancé's personality. She wanted to get along with him first, so she called to make an appointment to see him. And the result? This bastard had a cold face, as if he didn't know her. What kind of person was she? A true blue princess with princess syndrome, a vain ghost, and a super fairy. Yi Yuxuan, this expressionless person with eyes that grew to the ceiling, his attitude was enough to make her bear a grudge. Who wasn't a little princess or a little prince? Why did he dislike her so much? If he disliked her, then so be it. Let's just dislike each other. Address of the full text, https://www.sashu.com// Download of the full text, https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 889. Yi Yuxuan tried to recall, and the image of her at that time appeared in his mind. She was sitting obediently on the blue sofa in the living room. She was wearing a white dress, with air bangs. Her long hair reached her waist, and there was a pearl hair clip in her hair. She looked like a little lady. When he walked over, he only glanced at her lightly. He actually remembered it so clearly. Yi Yuxuan recalled and said, "You didn't have much of a presence at that time. I forgot who you were." He had completely forgotten that he had a fiancée. So when she appeared, he automatically treated her as an insignificant person. Wei Wei Bai, could this answer be more heartless? Wei Wei Bai let go of his face. She twisted her fingers and took a few deep breaths before saying, "After that, you treated me like air every time. Like hell I like you. Tui, I like ghosts more than you." Falling in love with the iceberg CEO was a plot. Novels were ridiculous, let alone reality. Who would have the patience to live with an iceberg face? Yi Yuxuan lowered his thick eyelashes. Although his expression was indifferent, he didn't know why he felt a little sad. He pursed his lips and said softly, "I still treat you like air now." Wei Wei Bai was about to frown. But she heard his deep and gentle voice. "I'm everywhere. Without you, I would suffocate." It was a serious and sincere sentence. It should have been mushy, but it was incomparably sincere. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that she couldn't even win against a stoic face when it came to romantic words. This world really made people feel hopeless. Wei Wei Bai's heart actually beat a few beats faster. She couldn't help but touch her chest. Fortunately, she didn't have a heart attack. Wei Wei Bai knew that at this point, she might as well just smash the pot. Anyway, he wouldn't believe her even if she giggled and said that she loved him. She might as well just say it. Anyway, she was full of resentment towards him. "Tell me, what did your fiancé do to me? You didn't care when my family was in trouble, and you didn't ask when I was sick. People know that I have a fiancé and want me to call you to come out and take a look, but I don't even have your number. How embarrassing." Speaking of which, Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt a little sad. At first, she also thought that since she had a rich fiancé, her life should be more romantic. She had been foolish and sweet before. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been fooled by her scumbag sister for so long. "In the end, you didn't give me flowers, you didn't take me to a yacht, you didn't know my birthday, you weren't by my side when I was sad, you didn't understand my despair at all." As Wei Wei Bai spoke, she suddenly felt, sure enough, aside from Yi Yuxuan's HP, there was nothing special about her. He was completely useless. Even if she wanted ***, it would be better than this stinky man. Bai Weiwei raised her eyes and said sincerely, "Yi Yuxuan, you tell me, is what you did a human being? You said that I lied to you, but you either ignored me or locked me up and treated me as your possession." She shook the chains. "How do you want me to like you?" These words were so heavy that it could pierce through his heart. Yi Yuxuan had never heard such a heartfelt truth. She had always lied to him, coaxed him, and sweet-talked him. Even passionate as fire. He looked at her blankly. His usually calm mind was completely messed up. Wei Wei Bai heard the system notification. "My HP has increased by another 100 days." Even the system was astonished by this crazy increase. "Why did you suddenly provoke him so much?" Wei Wei Bai said to the system calmly, "I can't lie to Yi Yuxuan. If I want to live, then I can't shamelessly continue to attack him with false feelings." The system said, "Then what are you going to do?" "Wei Wei Bai, let's exchange feelings for feelings." Since he couldn't fool him, he might as well reveal his true emotions. Indeed, she did not like him that much. Even if it did throb, it wasn't true love. Suddenly, the chains on her wrists were undone. Wei Wei Bai looked at him in confusion. However, she discovered that Yi Yuxuan had lowered his head and gently kissed her wrist. Then, he raised his head, and for the first time, a helpless look of affection appeared in his eyes. "Then tell me, what do I have to do to make you like me?" He paused and said, "I'll change them all. I'll change the ones you don't like." Wei Wei Bai. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here, /transmigration system, Adonis, come here, / transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Download transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Mobile transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Comma. Chapter 890. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath and said to the system, Yi Yuxuan seems to have been transmigrated. This isn't him. The ice-cold man turned into a helpless and pitiful puppy. The difference was so big that the earth flipped several times. The system said, this is him. Love changes people. You have to believe that your charm is enough to bring the dead back to life. Erectile dysfunction will turn into Shikijiru, and the Antarctic face will turn into an equatorial face. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. What a magical equatorial face. What kind of weird description was that? She looked up at him carefully and found that Yi Yuxuan's face had softened a lot. Although his expression was still paralyzed, at least it was more pleasing to the eye. It was not the equatorial face, but the Antarctic face was a few degrees warmer. Wei Wei Bai tried to say, Yi Yuxuan, why do you like me so much all of a sudden? Yi Yuxuan was silent for a while before saying, you're the person in my dreams. The person in my dreams. Wei Wei Bai was confused for a while. Did he mean that she was the person in his dreams? Yi Yuxuan's voice was magnetic, and now that he lowered his voice and softened it, it was even more irresistible. I've never had any emotional fluctuations. I've never experienced happiness, anger, sorrow, or joy. But you brought me all kinds of emotions that I can't believe. When I see you, I think you're beautiful. My heart beats faster and dopamine secretes crazily. My physiological reaction makes me unable to control myself. It was like fate, ever since he started to enter the dream world. She was the one who brought him all his happiness and sorrow. When he saw her in reality, he was often in a state of despair, but was saved by her. This feeling was too painful, but it was too wonderful. Wei Wei Bai could not understand Yi Yuxuan's feelings. She tried to say, then when did you start to have feelings for me? She had been his fiancée for so long, but he really did not have any reaction to her. When did he start to chase after her? Wei Wei Bai began to recall. The system suddenly interrupted, the plane is ready. In 10 minutes, we will forcibly transmigrate. Wei Wei Bai's contemplation was interrupted. Why so sudden? Don't I have many days of HP? The system said, 800 days are up, but something unexpected happened. This time, the plane passage is not stable. We must enter as soon as possible, or else the passage may collapse. Wei Wei Bai, why didn't this happen before? The system said coldly, 9 more minutes. Wei Wei Bai really wanted to slap the system. Yi Yuxuan saw that her expression was natural. He lowered his eyes. The first time you made my heart throb was, however, Wei Wei Bai felt that her ears were ringing and her head was heavy. She frowned and couldn't hear Yi Yuxuan's words clearly. By the time he felt better, Yi Yuxuan had finished speaking. So when exactly did he start to have feelings for her? She did not hear him at all. Do you want to ask again? Trash fried system, it's been 7 minutes, 6 minutes, what could he do in such a short time? Yi Yuxuan was so generous with her HP, Wei Wei Bai always felt that if she did not give him some benefits, she would be a bit of a scumbag. She suddenly said, okay, I know I'm your emotional provider. If you meet other women in the future, they can also stir up your emotions. Are you going to run away with them? Yi Yuxuan, no. His eyes were extremely deep and his tone was firm. There are no other women, men, children, old people, animals, crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu com//crossover system, Adonis, come here and txt download at https://www.sashu.com crossover system, Adonis, come here and read it on. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 891. Wei Bai, how could someone say something so funny in such a serious manner? She said, all right, I believe you. Come on, turn around. Yi Yuxuan looked at her hesitantly, as though he was afraid that she would disappear if he turned around. Wei Bai stretched out her leg and kicked him lightly. She said capriciously, hurry up. How can you be my fiancé? Why are you so disobedient? Yi Yuxuan shifted his body and turned around. Then he suddenly felt a weight on his back. Wei Bai was lying on his back. Fiancé, carry me. Yi Yuxuan's posture stiffened. He felt her soft body rubbing against the back of his hand. He stretched out his hands and carried her on his back. Wei Bai laid on his back lazily as though she had no bones. Let's go to the bathroom. I want to take a shower. Yi Yuxuan took half a step forward and stopped. Us? Wei Bai's voice was soft. She purposely pressed against his ear like a seductive demoness. Hurry up. Yi Yuxuan, he grunted, then took a step forward with his long legs. He walked quickly to the bathroom door and gave it a hard kick. The door slammed open and hit the wall. This strength could kill. Wei Bai looked at Yi Yuxuan's ferocious actions and suddenly wondered if she had gone overboard with her flirting. She was going to turn him into a beast. After entering the bathroom, she got off his back with some effort. Then she said to Yi Yuxuan, why aren't you turning on the water? Yi Yuxuan blinked, clearly a little dazed. Perhaps it was the first time someone had ordered him around like this. He was a little surprised and curious. If someone else had spoken to him like this, he would have ignored them. But this person was Wei Bai. He actually felt a wave of joy in his heart. Because from the moment she said that she hated him, all her expressions and actions were real. This gave his uneasy heart a little bit of peace. At least she wasn't lying to him. Yi Yuxuan rolled up his sleeves and personally tested the temperature of the water for her. His fingers touched the warm water and moved gently. His movements were elegant and nimble. He had already tested the best temperature for her. Suddenly, he was stunned. The sound of clothes falling to the ground came from behind him. The steam was rising in the bathroom. Yi Yuxuan turned around and saw Bai Weiwei take off her pajamas as if nothing had happened. The clothes slipped down to her delicate white ankles. Her body was graceful and slender, and her skin was as delicate as jade. Bai Weiwei reached out and tucked her thick long hair behind her back. Her movements were natural and generous. It was as if Yi Yuxuan was just a decoration. His burning gaze couldn't affect her at all. Yi Yuxuan's hands were still in the water. He didn't move at all when he turned around. He suddenly felt his mouth and tongue dry. There seemed to be an intense desire surging out from the depths of his throat. But Wei Bai's next sentence poured cold water on his head. Yi Yuxuan, I might die. Yi Yuxuan was silent for a while. Then, he twisted his stiff neck. His expression tensed up. It was even colder than before. There's no such possibility. Wei Bai stepped into the bathtub as if nothing had happened. She sat in the water. She tilted her head. Her eyes seemed to be stained with water. You know my body. I've been sleeping. Also, my heart isn't good. I might die at any time. Crossover system, Adonis, come here. /crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration System, Adonis, come here and read this on your phone, https://m.sashu.com, there. Chapter 893. Wei Wei Bai woke up from scolding the system. You piece of trash. Tell me, did you eat too much and become overweight? That's why you're dizzy from transmigration. She had never left early before, unless she agreed to it. However, this plain passage was like a storm. Even when she was asleep, she still felt dizzy. It was as painful as motion sickness. The system said, you fainted because I was so hungry that I couldn't carry you. That's why I staggered when I walked. Wei Wei Bai, the system was exhausted. The next time we transmigrate, I might not be able to carry your soul. I'll have to drag you. Wei Wei Bai said, nonsense. I'm so light that I can fly. How am I heavy? The system said, you eat Yi Yuxuan's life points. You're heavy. Wei Wei Bai, she was just about to argue with the system about whether the soul was heavy or not. A scream rang out. Then, there were many screams, all from women. Wei Wei Bai looked up. The floor was covered in blood. She was so scared that she took a few steps back and almost fell. She turned around and saw a young girl lying on the floor. She was emaciated and had a ferocious look on her face. Wei Wei Bai took a deep breath. What the hell? She raised her head and looked around, only to find that she was in an incomparably luxurious hall. The dazzling crystal chandelier was obviously expensive. Not to mention the dazzling jewels, antiques, and famous paintings that filled the hall. The air was filled with the nauseating smell of fresh blood. At least hundreds of young girls were running around screaming. The towering stone door was tightly shut. It was not something that could be opened by a human. Wei Wei Bai suppressed the discomfort of smelling the blood and the irritation in her heart. She immediately entered calm observation mode. She suddenly realized that something was wrong. There was danger. Without waiting for the system's reminder, she had already followed her instincts and pounced forward. The predator leaping down from the ceiling only managed to grab the hem of her gorgeous dress. Wei Wei Bai was wearing a pink lace tutu skirt. Her brown curly hair was messy. She fell to the ground and stabbed something in her arm. Blood immediately flowed out. The floor was littered with glass shards, and the red wine and blood were all over the floor. Ignoring the headache from the memory transfer, she saw the man who jumped down from the ceiling. He had black hair and red eyes. His face was deathly pale like a zombie. His face was filled with a maniacal grin, and two terrifying fangs were exposed at the side of his mouth. What the hell was that? Wei Wei Bai then realized that in this terrifyingly large hall, other than the screaming girls, there were also some creatures that looked like men, hunting. Memories swarmed into her mind. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. She already knew what these inhuman hunters were. Vampires. She quickly got up and ran. Behind her, the vampire laughed sinisterly and followed her unhurriedly. It seemed that he wanted to tease his prey and wait until she was in despair before he bit her to death. Wei Wei Bai grabbed the collar of her dress tightly. When she fell, the buttons flew off, revealing most of her skin. She frowned and heard the footsteps of the vampire following her. Memories of this world appeared in her mind. This was a world where vampires ruled over humans. Although humans were large in number, they were like the food pigs raised by vampires. In front of vampires who were as strong as gods, no matter if it was strength, intelligence, action, or leadership, they were all useless. //. Chapter 894. Blood Kindred had a strict hierarchy. A higher-level blood kindred could order a lower-level blood kindred. And in terms of hierarchy, it depended on the bloodline. The older the bloodline, the more powerful it was. For example, the noblest bloodline was inherited from the first blood kindred ancestor. Wei Wei Bai saw these messy settings and couldn't help but want to curse. What the hell was this? Don't tell her that the target of her strategy was the annoying vampire who was chasing after her. Wei Wei Bai finished looking through the memories. She also knew why she appeared at the vampire's blood feast. The blood feast, as the name suggested, was a feast for sucking blood. It was a type of entertainment that vampires liked to hold the most. They would use the name of the noble blood kindred to invite beautiful and clean virgins to this feast. And the girls that came were all here to become a blood kindred. The feast was in the name of finding the next generation of vampires, so that a large number of girls would flock here. Blood kindred could use the embrace to turn humans into blood kindred. In this world, blood kindred were the absolute upper echelons, nobles, and masters of all humans. Everyone envied blood kindred, wanting to abandon their lowly human identity and become a high and mighty blood kindred. And the original owner also came for the opportunity to receive the embrace. But she didn't expect that not long after the feast started, it would become a feast for the vampires. Those virgins were sucked dry of blood and turned into skinny corpses. Wei Wei Bai said to the system, "What kind of world is this? How can humans be so lowly? If it was me, I would overthrow these vampire bats. Humans are the head of all things." The system immediately said eagerly, "There are free flags in the supermarket that can be claimed. Why don't I give you one, and you can wave the flag that says I'm going to revolt and start a rebellion." Wei Wei Bai, scram. The vampire behind her seemed to have finally lost his patience. He suddenly sped up and said with a laugh, "Little darling, didn't you want the embrace? Why are you running? Come into my embrace, let me kiss your neck." Bai Weiwei felt goosebumps rising on her skin. Her expression was somewhat ugly. Damn it, this was such a large-scale hunting scene. This was really a test of one's ability to survive. What's more, the system didn't tell her who her target was. However, Wei Wei Bai gave it some thought. In this situation, staying alive was the most important thing. She definitely couldn't care less about who her target was. Another young girl screamed as she collapsed. Her blood was sucked dry by the vampires. Her delicate white skin immediately caved in, turning into a withered and terrifying shape. Bai Weiwei turned her head and saw the frightening scene of the hunt. Suddenly, even the rice from the other plane was about to be thrown up. She was wearing an A-line gown similar to the ones worn by medieval noblewomen. The huge skirt was as gorgeous as a blooming flower. However, it was extremely inconvenient for him to move around. The fingers of the vampire behind her had already touched her shoulder. She hardened her heart and was about to call out the system to exchange for life-saving items. After all, she now had 800 HP. No matter how big or small she was, she could still squander it. He was just about to communicate with the system. The system yelled, "Run forward, the target is sitting there." Wei Wei Bai followed its words and hurriedly ran forward. Passing through the screaming crowd, a black throne appeared at the top of the hall. There was a tall person leaning on the throne. Wei Wei Bai didn't see anything clearly. She ran too fast and stepped on the edge of the skirt and fell down. Chapter 895. This feeling of loss of control caused by Wei Wei's always calm thinking to shatter. Without hesitation, she reached out and slapped him on his pale but delicate face. This action caught him off guard. Other than the young girl's scream, all the vampires stopped hunting and looked at Wei Wei Bai silently. A human actually dared to hit Prince Arthur. This made all the vampires at the scene feel a chill down their spines. They were worried that they would be killed by their prince together with this human. This slap made Arthur's body freeze. Her strength was not worth mentioning. He didn't even feel the slightest itch. He only felt that her fingers were like feathers, gently brushing the skin on his face. But this action was a form of disobedience. Even to the high-ranking vampires, this was a human's provocation to the vampires. An action that was not allowed to exist. The prince's eyes, from the confusion and greed, instantly returned to coldness. His killing intent increased his aura. After Bai Weiwei finished beating the Chinibu vampire, she suddenly woke up. Her brain was originally confused because of the excessive blood loss and the pleasure of being bitten. She immediately knew that she had made a wrong judgment. She had angered this vampire who had a favorability of -30. A bunch of thoughts flashed through Wei Wei Bai's mind. The lack of information about the target made her unable to make the most correct response. She saw that Arthur's cold fingers had already reached her neck, as if he was going to break her neck bone. Between life and death, she followed her instincts and curled herself up. She stretched out her hands and hugged his cold neck tightly. Her whole body shrunk into his embrace. Her warm breath, with the sweet smell of blood, blew by his ear. "Sir, don't kill me, I beg you." She begged weakly, "I'm willing to do anything for you, anything." Delicious prey, like a sweet fruit, emitted a smell that made vampires crazy. Arthur's fingers were on her neck, and he almost broke it. But she begged for mercy in fear and took the initiative to approach him. This made him hesitate. Wei Wei Bai seemed to sense his hesitation and hugged him even harder. She was like a kitten, kissing him on the cheek to please him. Her fragmented kisses continued to land on the places she had just hit. This was the first time Prince Arthur, who had lived for more than 100 years, was so close to someone. To be precise, it wasn't just people. No creature had ever been able to get so close to him and kiss him. This experience caused his body to stiffen for a few seconds. Her soft and delicious body kept trembling in his arms, as if she knew that she had made a big mistake. That was why she was willing to pay any price to please him. This kind of attachment without a bottom line made his anger from being offended dissipate a lot. He pursed his thin lips and suddenly grabbed her long hair. She was in so much pain that she couldn't help but raise her head. Arthur lowered his head and revealed his sharp teeth. He bit his wrist and then stuffed the blood into her mouth. The blood of vampires was also red. However, it was different from human blood. This kind of smell was extremely cold and domineering. Wei Wei Bai really wanted to vomit, but when she remembered that this lunatic was her target, she could only grit her teeth and take the initiative to suck the blood from his wrist. She cursed in her heart at this motherfucking vampire world. However, Arthur's fingers froze. The tip of her tongue licked the skin of his wrist. It gave him a strange feeling. What a bold human. // Chapter 896. Arthur's red eyes reflected her cute face coldly, and his murderous aura was not as strong. His voice was cold and demonic. "Since you've drunk my blood, you're mine. Stay by my side and provide me with your blood." Feeding blood to his prey. It was the most powerful way to mark a blood servant. Other than letting the prey emit his scent at all times, other vampires would not dare to touch her. What was more terrifying was that this scent made it impossible for her to escape from his tracking. If she wanted to run, he could easily find out where she was. After Arthur finished speaking, he ignored the shocked gazes of all the vampires present. He looked up casually and ordered coldly, "The blood feast is over, get out." After that, Arthur carried his prey and turned to leave. The stone door opened, and the girl who had survived the disaster. There was also a dumbfounded vampire who could only leave. The next day, the anorexic great noble, Prince Arthur, had a cute little blood servant. It spread throughout the city. And the noble circle. While everyone was guessing the origin of the little blood servant, Yizichin and the others were still trying to figure out the origin of the little blood servant. Wei Wei Bai, on the other hand, lost too much blood. Lying in the hospital on the verge of death. She had difficulty breathing, had nightmares, and her body was so heavy that she could not move. With great difficulty, she opened her eyes with strong willpower. She saw herself lying on a soft bed, a warm ward, and a tall stone window with sunlight shining in. This was different from other planes. It was not like ancient times, nor was it like modern times in the traditional sense. Human technology was still advanced, but at the same time, the blood breeds magic existed. Her wrist was pierced with a needle for blood transfusion, and the blood in the blood bag slowly flowed into her body. Wei Wei Bai saw that there was no one around, then said to the system fiercely, "Quick, give me that psychopath's information. How can I defeat him without information?" The system said, "The information was delayed this time, some of it was lost." Wei Wei Bai said, "Send it, send as much as you can." The system immediately sent her Arthur's information. Arthur was a great noble of the blood breed, the youngest elder who controlled the most power in the blood breed world. Because he saw humans killing each other in an ugly manner as a child, he developed the idea that humans were stupid and disgusting creatures. As a result, they began to loathe humans as food. He felt that drinking human blood would dirty his noble stomach. Therefore, he began to dislike human blood. As time passed, he developed anorexia and narcolepsy. Because of his constant hunger, his personality was tough and cold, but occasionally he would be violent and cruel. She didn't lack either whimsy or coldness. Wei Wei Bai finished reading the incomplete information. He began to analyze the character in his mind. This kind of brainless non-human should like strong and pure white little white flowers who still yearn for the light even after suffering all kinds of torture. Seeing the ugliness of humans made them anorexic. This meant that Arthur was a lunatic who liked things that were perfect and sunny. She pondered deeply. Could it be that this time, she was going to be a retard who would smile like a Virgin Mary and say, "Forgive you," even if her blood was sucked? Needless to say, he was mentally ill and mentally retarded. They were indeed a perfect match. The system replied, "Probably, probably." Wei Wei Bai said, "As a system, don't you feel ashamed to say uncertain words like probably?" The system immediately said proudly, "Under your influence, we have long abandoned shame. Being thick-skinned is our fine tradition." Chapter 897. Fortunately, it activated the life guarantee in time. Otherwise, the host would be committing suicide. Wei Wei Bai only sprained her ankle under the guarantee of life guarantee. She stumbled and ran towards the forest in front. The system quickly said, "Why are you running? Don't you want the strategy?" Wei Wei Bai said, "Nonsense, I'm talking about the strategy, this is the fun. Sitting on the bed and waiting for my blood to be sucked is a puppet, I have to move and fill out my character setting to gain favorability." The system said, "What kind of character setting do you have?" What kind of weird character setting did the host give herself again? Wei Wei Bai said, "I'm a cute, pretty, strong, and bright little girl who looks obedient on the surface, but actually wants to escape from the evil vampire's cage. I'm kind and beautiful, I'm pure and," the system said, "Evil, don't say any more, I was wrong, my face is not thick enough to listen to you, please forgive me." Wei Wei Bai said, "What, don't you think I'm very similar to this character setting? This is simply me acting in my own character." The system said, "Pfft." It spat out a mouthful of blood. The host's face was really thicker than the other planes. She only ate to gain face. Wei Wei Bai ran into the forest and said to the system, "The original host didn't know Arthur, although she came to the blood feast with the intention of becoming a vampire, she was mostly tricked into coming here." The original host studied in an aristocratic school. Because of her excellent grades, her deskmate was jealous. Her deskmate knew that the blood feast was a vampire's hunting feast, but she still gave the invitation to the original host. She tricked her into going to the feast. Yes, that invitation did not belong to the original host. After Wei Wei Bai looked at the original host's memory, she knew that the original host was also miserable. Although she was ambitious, she was also vain. At least she did not do anything that was heartless. She was really unlucky to have met such a deskmate. She thought for a while and knew how to change her character setting. After all, she was so flattering yesterday, but today she would rather die than submit. It was a good play. And the invitation that was tricked out of him was a turning point. Didn't you want the sunshine, little white flower? She was a proper little white flower. Bai Weiwei limped forward, thinking about her character in detail, as well as the strategy, while running forward. She stumbled and fell in a sorry state. Her white nightgown was torn by the branches, and there were small bloodstains on her bare feet. Her brown curly hair fluttered behind her. She was slender and light, hidden in the gaps between the leaves. Light and shadow modeled her white body. It was like a dazzling stream of light. It slid into the eyes of the man above her head. This moment of amazement actually pierced through his heart of stone. Ding! The male lead's favorability is at -30. Wei Wei Bai, why did the favorability increase? Could it be that running away had taken effect so quickly? Arthur finally knew that she was a tenacious little white flower, so he had a good impression of her. He had just thought of that. The system reminded her, the male lead is up there. Wei Wei Bai looked up. Up there. A terrifying shadow loomed over her head. Wei Wei Bai's eyes appeared. Huge bat wings, a black fluffy body, and a pair of terrifying red eyes. A huge and terrifying bat was above her head, staring at her coldly. Wei Wei Bai, no, she refused. She refused to be the target of the bat. But when the bat saw her, it let out a terrifying sharp sound, and then directly swooped down on her. Slash. Chapter 898. Wei Wei Bai, ugly, don't come over, ugly. She wanted to change dimensions. She couldn't bite the bat male protagonist. Wei Wei Bai was too anxious to escape. She tripped over a tree root and fell to the ground. The bat had already rushed through the forest. With an extremely handsome posture, it retracted its wings and landed heavily in front of Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai awkwardly retreated until she leaned against a big tree. Then, she hugged herself tightly and looked at the bat. The dust rose and fell again. A man wearing a black aristocratic costume with golden edges nimbly jumped down from the bat's back. His movements were light as if he was flying. His long silver hair swayed and fell back on his back. Bai Weiwei reluctantly revealed an ugly smile. Darren, why are you here? Arthur slowly walked in front of her. His chin was slightly raised and his eyelids were lowered. He was cold and arrogant as if he was looking at a lowly insect. His cold expression suddenly softened. Because of this gentleness, the originally exquisite and beautiful face, the thin and cold lips, the tall and handsome nose, and the pair of black eyes that seemed to be flowing with red light, all turned into water, bringing with it a sense of warmth. He didn't threaten her, nor did he fly into a rage. He only said indifferently in a gentle voice, "Why did you suddenly think of coming to the forest to see the scenery?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes were full of vigilance. She gritted her teeth and looked at him coldly. However, she clumsily put on a flattering look. She forced a smile. "I'm not lost. This place is a bit big." Arthur observed her for a while and suppressed the sarcastic smile on his face. He said gently, "Indeed, this place is very big. The forest is full of poisonous snakes. For a human, it is very dangerous. Wei Wei Bai's pupils shrank when she heard about poisonous snakes. Arthur seemed to look at her with some pity. He squatted down and still looked high and mighty. Also, outside the forest, there are all kinds of monsters and wild beasts waiting for humans who are alone. If they catch you, his fingers carelessly caressed her trembling face. It was as if he could not feel her fear at all. He smiled and said, "If you're caught, you'll be torn to pieces and eaten." When he spoke these words, his eyes turned red. It was terrifying, and the fangs by his mouth suddenly appeared. He looked incomparably beastly. Wei Wei Bai's body trembled, but the fear in her eyes was suddenly replaced by clear determination. She suddenly reached out and stabbed him in the chest. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time, so his movements were fast and accurate. The silver cross in her hand was worn by the original owner. It might be an ornament, but Wei Wei Bai used it as a weapon. The gentleness on Arthur's sickly pale face disappeared. His eyes turned completely red, and a violent distortion appeared in his eyes. Vampires were not afraid of sunlight, so her actions did not cause any harm to him. However, he was thoroughly enraged. A lowly human would not crawl under his feet to survive. He actually dared to run away. He was going to participate in the Sacred Blood Conference on his mount. As a result, he sensed that his blood servant had shown a strong desire to escape. Without hesitation, he turned around and gave chase. It was rare for him to find a human whose blood could enter his mouth. Moreover, in these few months, the Sacred Blood Conference would decide who the next leader of the vampires would be. Their 13 elders were all eyeing this position covetously. Therefore, he needed this human's blood to replenish his strength. When he chased after her, he even wondered if he had sensed wrongly. Chapter 899. Wei Wei Bai felt that there was something wrong with the image of a little white flower. Perhaps she should have adopted the image of a tyrant flower. When she was stepped on by Arthur to eat dirt, she finally fainted. When she woke up again, she heard people talking. "So this is the blood servant. I heard that Prince Arthur rejected the Holy Blood Conference just to capture her. She doesn't look like anything special. Is it the smell of her blood? The blood that the prince likes must be more delicious. The escaping blood servant needs to be punished. When she wakes up, if the prince doesn't protect her, then start punishing her, hee hee." A bunch of women's voices rang out. They buzzed like thousands of flies. Wei Wei Bai was annoyed. She had to conquer and deal with perverts at the same time. Her body was still losing too much blood. Couldn't she just have a good sleep? She had always had a low tolerance for targets that were not part of her strategy. Wei Wei Bai suddenly opened her eyes and saw that she was lying on a huge bed. There were hazy gauze curtains hanging around her. She tore open the curtains and saw a bunch of women wearing Rococo-style dresses laughing and talking. "What the hell is this?" The system said, "Your maid." By Wei Wei, "Fuck, I actually have a maid, this thing." The system said, "Because you are the prince's blood servant, there will be human noblewomen serving you as your maids." Wei Wei Bai said, "They don't come with good intentions." These women did not look like they were here to serve her. They looked more like they were here to trip her up. She looked pale and cute as she poked her head out from behind the gauze curtains. The women looked over and were stunned. Because Bai Weiwei was too cute and fair, and her eyes were also very special round-shaped cat eyes. For a moment, none of the women said anything. Weiwei Bai frowned. "Who are you?" As soon as she spoke, the women knelt down and saluted her. Their attitude was a little careless. "Miss, we are here to serve you." Wei Wei Bai looked at them warily. Her fingers gripped the gauze curtain tightly. She seemed very nervous. The disdain in the eyes of those human maids increased. One of the maids walked over. Because you ran away, you need to be punished before His Majesty the Prince forgives you. Wei Wei Bai sneered, why should I accept punishment? What kind of thing is a blood servant? I don't admit to it at all. What you're doing is imprisoning, kidnapping, and torturing. According to the law, you should be imprisoned and sentenced. As soon as this sentence came out, the women at the scene were silent for a moment, and then they laughed together. To think that there are still humans who can say such things. How laughable. As the blood servant of a noble prince, you should be proud. Being a blood servant is such a glorious thing. Your parents will be happy for you. You really don't know what's good for you. There must be something wrong with your head. You should start receiving your punishment. Wei Wei Bai, on the other hand, had a cold expression on her face. Her face was extremely tense as she asked doubtfully, aren't you humans? How can you be so willing to be oppressed by vampires and still be proud of it? These were even more outrageous words. This world was controlled by vampires. One of the human maids finally couldn't take it anymore. She rushed over and pulled the weak Wei Wei Bai off the bed. She was high above, fanning herself as she coldly looked at her. What are you thinking in that head of yours? How can a lowly human like us insult a noble blood clan? Chapter 900. Wei Wei Bai was speechless. Although her character was a strong and unyielding little cutie who would never admit defeat. Every word he said was pretentious and courting death. But these people in front of her were probably humans. Why did she feel that the humans in this world had been thoroughly brainwashed by vampires? She couldn't help but ask the system, can we change the main mission? I feel that something as trivial as conquering a vampire's love is nothing compared to the great cause of human liberation. Humans have been brainwashed to such an extent. As a human, she really wanted to sigh. The system said, sigh, why do you always want to die like this? Isn't it good to admit that vampires are noble and beautiful, and that you lowly humans are not worthy of them? Wei Wei Bai was shocked, are you possessed by vampires? The system said, no, it's just that I suddenly saw a side mission and couldn't bear to give it to you. Wei Wei Bai said, side mission? How crazy can it be? I'm used to it, don't underestimate my tolerance. The system said, just a reminder, this side mission was suggested by you to the main system. It finished speaking. The system beep sounded, followed by an impassioned background music. It was the kind of music that could automatically elevate one's level and kill the enemy with a broadsword. In the background music, the system's calm automatic beep sounded excited. Humans will never be slaves. The host is willing to use her own flesh and blood to fight against the dirty vampire army. It's inspiring. Wei Wei Bai, I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like the side mission is definitely, fuck it. Please complete the mission of resisting vampires and destroying the vampiric empire with all your might. Ding, the resisting vampires side mission has been activated. Go, young girl, your glorious road of blood has been opened. Humans are noble, vampires will one day be a dish on our table. This mission had just been issued. A red blood bar appeared above Wei Wei Bai's head. Side mission failed, spin 100 times on the spot and self-destruct along with the system. Wei Wei Bai. What kind of punishment was self-destructing on the spot? Was this a punishment for her cheap mouth? Wei Wei Bai, system, I was wrong. Vampires, no, the noble blood clan is the leader of all things. They are the strongest in the universe. Humans are chinibu and weak. They deserve to be inferior. Hurry up and tell the main system that I'm afraid of death and can't take on the task of being humanity's savior. She couldn't bear this task. How could a weak and pitiful girl like her bear such a heavy task? The system said, "Don't talk to me, I'll go quietly. 6 months later, we'll definitely self-destruct together, so let me go and have some fun." Wei Wei Bai said, "This mission is too big and too unreasonable. How am I supposed to fight against the entire vampiric empire by myself? Are you trying to kill me?" The system said, "Actually, you don't have to succeed. You just have to hold on until your HP bar turns green." Wei Wei Bai, turn green. The system replied, "It means that if you keep resisting and causing the vampires to suffer losses, your health bar will turn green. Once you've caused enough damage to the vampires, your health bar will turn completely green." After all, Wei Wei Bai was a host who didn't have many cheats to fight against the entire vampiric empire. The main system wouldn't go to that extent. After Wei Wei Bai heard this, she was in a daze and thought for a while. It really didn't seem that difficult. As if this was a strategy that couldn't let her have a comfortable time, so she had to go to hell mode to die. Wei Wei Bai's face paled. The maids thought that they had scared her, so they couldn't help but laugh and say, "Miss, get up. Your punishment time is up." Download the at https://m/sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Chapter 901. After saying that, two maids rushed over and lifted her up. In this world, her body was petite and cute, so she was easily dragged away. Wei Wei Bai was still thinking about how to make her health bar turn green. But he was already being pushed forward by someone. It was noon when the sun was at its best. After leaving the door, Wei Wei Bai found that there were many people outside. It seemed to be a very lively street. Then a maid said to everyone in a loud voice, "This person disobeyed the orders of His Highness the Prince. His Highness is merciful and will reduce the death sentence to oral punishment." Oral punishment, a strange punishment method. Then Wei Wei Bai saw the so-called oral punishment. "Bitch, as a human, you actually dared to disobey the honorable prince. You are a disgrace to us humans." Wei Wei Bai, shocking. This person is so shameless. She doesn't even have self-respect. Why is she kneeling and licking the vampires? How disgusting. How can there be such a person among us humans? Hurry up and die. Wei Wei Bai, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't itch. She had died so many times that she was calm. Ugly freak, a woman with a rotten face like yours should immediately kill herself. How can you disobey our honorable prince? Wei Wei Bai, ugly freak. Ugly freak. Who said she was ugly? Stand up and use your face to compare. Don't be a coward. Her eyes suddenly widened. Her brown eyes were full of gloomy murderous intent as she looked at the crowd. The sunlight just happened to fall into her clear eyes. They were lively without any dispirited expression. She straightened her back. Every step she took was very stable. There was no trace of sadness or embarrassment on her face from being scolded. It seemed that these scoldings couldn't hurt her at all. Her long curly hair fell to her waist. On her fair face, her delicate lips were tightly pursed. She was even arrogant, as if she didn't care about those who scolded her. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said coldly, "A bunch of cowards who only know how to bow and scrape before vampires. After kneeling for so long, your knees are broken. You can't even get up. You can only squirm on the ground like maggots. You guys disgust me." The HP bar above his head suddenly turned a little green. Wei Wei Bai suddenly realized something, and her tone became heavier. "As humans, you are willing to be slaves. Flattering and lowly. There are so many of us, but we are ruled by vampires who are only 1/10 of our number. How embarrassing. As soon as this sentence came out, the crowd fell silent at once. This silence was even fearful. Because if he said that, it was very likely that he would be killed. Everyone looked at Wei Wei Bai as if they were looking at a dead person. Wei Wei Bai saw that the HP bar above her head had turned a little green. She suddenly realized that the so-called resistance against the vampires was actually just using words to resist. She had thought that she would have to recruit people and spend her days thinking about how to make a vampire turn green. The system reminded her, the male lead is on a tower not far away. His eyesight is very good. He can see you and hear your words, which is why his HP bar is green. After Wei Wei Bai heard the system's words, she naturally raised her head and struck a beautiful pose. She sneered, her eyes full of disdain, and swept across the tower. Then she turned around and walked into the crowd without hesitation. She didn't even need the maid behind her to push her. On the tower, a pale and slender hand crushed the edge of the tower's bricks. The cold wind blew, and the long silver hair fluttered, shining beautifully under the sun. Chapter 902. Arthur lowered his head and saw her carrying him as she walked towards the crowd. He grinned coldly, revealing his snow-white teeth. He originally wanted to let her get the punishment she deserved. However, her reaction was very interesting. Humans were all cowardly creatures that sought approval. Being disdained and insulted by their own companions should be very sad and miserable. Instead, she was like a victor, teaching everyone a lesson. When she scolded this group of vampires, the holy light on her face was simply too clean and beautiful. Too clean. Arthur couldn't help but swallow his dry throat. He really wanted to tear her apart and let her bright red and sweet blood flow all over the ground. Then, he would slowly step on it. It would definitely be delicious. But when he thought about tearing this little prey apart, he couldn't find another one. Even if he found one, it would definitely not be as interesting as this one. For the first time, a strange sense of anxiety appeared in his heart. Arthur lowered his thick eyelashes, and the thick shadow covered the red in his eyes. His voice was soft and cold. It seems that verbal torture is not enough. Then, let's begin the real punishment. This sentence became an order and was passed down. Then, Wei Wei Bai felt that something was wrong with the crowd. All kinds of cold, evil, and twisted emotions flashed in those people's eyes. Wei Wei Bai knew in the next moment why the atmosphere of the crowd changed. An egg hit her. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back, and her body was hit by a rock. She groaned. The order was given. It said that if you don't kill her, you can do anything. These words spread in the crowd. Jealous women ran over and wanted to tear off Wei Wei Bai's beautiful long hair. Wei Wei Bai immediately turned and ran. A lustful light flashed in the men's eyes. As long as they didn't kill her, it was fine. In other words, they could do anything to her. During the punishment, the crowd who acted as the punisher was not guilty. This made the malice of human nature begin to expand. Wei Wei Bai moved very quickly and dodged the attacks of a few women. She finally knew that second-year syndrome was contagious. Just like rabies, there was a pile behind her. The streets were bustling with activity and many things. Wei Wei Bai displayed the skills she had learned from watching Hong Kong films for many years. She knocked down everything she saw and threw chairs at them. He threw whatever he saw as he drilled into the alley. It seemed that Arthur was right. He really did want to force her to kneel down and lick his feet. If the entire city attacked her, it was possible that she would be beaten to death. She didn't expect the male lead of this world to have so much power. Humans were indeed brainwashed into slaves. Suddenly, a stone hit her on the head. Wei Wei Bai's mind went blank for a moment. Blood flowed down from her forehead. She covered her head, frowned, and cursed under her breath. Just as she was about to run, she was tripped by someone. Wei Bai fell heavily to the ground. She sucked in a breath of cold air. Her knees and elbows were bleeding, and she lay on the ground. A man had already rushed over and grabbed her long hair. "You're not bad looking. You've offended a high-ranking blood clan noble. Killing you is a light punishment." A few men followed and surrounded him. The women on the outside looked at her with evil smiles. Wei Bai really wasn't possessed by a Chinibu, but at this moment, she really felt that human nature was evil. And as long as she followed the crowd's heart, even if she killed someone, she wouldn't feel guilty. Wei Bai couldn't help but say to the system, "Sigh, in this world, only I am the purest, kindest, and most determined little sunshine sweetheart." Chapter 903. Look at this group of people, how ugly. System, to set up the character setting, the host has been possessed. Wei Bai spat, "You are not fit to be human, vampires' lackeys." The men's faces immediately turned ugly. Suddenly, a hand began to tear Wei Bai's clothes. Her collar was pulled open. Wei Bai gritted her teeth and suddenly grabbed the stone that was thrown at her, and ruthlessly threw it at the man who was violently attacking her. Then she got up and ran forward in a sorry state. But there were people everywhere. Tearing, beating, chasing crazily. Making her struggle until she was on the verge of death. But she did not give in at all, even when faced with the attacks of so many people. Her body was dirty and her head was bleeding. She still did not beg for mercy, nor did she make a sound. Her footsteps slowed down, and her body became heavier and heavier. Even her eyes were filled with despair. The man standing at the top of the tower had a calm expression on his face, but his expression darkened. The anxiety in Arthur's heart continued to expand. Begging for mercy, crying, to the point of showing the most unbearable side of her. Why was there nothing? He went from being indifferent at the beginning to now staring at the traces of the little prey. She was really smart. So many people surrounded her in such a strange place. She actually knew how to use the complicated terrain to escape. If it wasn't for the fact that to punish her, Sunset City would have been closed. Who knows, she might really run away. Arthur lowered his head and saw that she was actually hiding under a dry well at the entrance of an alley. Her face was covered in blood, but it did not detract from the brilliance of her beautiful cat eyes. He saw her calmly binding her ankle with a piece of cloth. It seemed to be the foot that was twisted. She lowered her head, but she did not cry dejectedly. Instead, she hid herself deeper and looked at the well vigilantly. She even held a wooden stick, as if she wanted to perish together with those who hurt her. Arthur suddenly couldn't remember her flattery on the first day when they met. No, it was not that he couldn't remember. But when he thought about it, he even felt that it was rare to see her flattering. Because ever since she failed to escape, she did not curry favor with him at all. Instead, she staked everything on one throw and risked her life to leave him. This was her true face, a human who hated vampires. There weren't many of these kinds of humans, but they weren't few either. However, there were almost none who dared to be so brazen. Arthur's handsome face, which was as cold as ice, was somewhat distorted, revealing a murderous smile. He said softly, "Pull her out of the well. A bug should behave like a bug. Pets were supposed to please their owners. How could he be so independent? He hated puppets, and he hated puppets that were so disobedient." Wei Bai thought that she could hide for a little longer, but in the end, she was discovered and dragged out. She couldn't help but curse the system. If it wasn't for the fact that the favorability didn't change, I would have thought that the crazy dog was so disgusted that he wanted to kill me. There was nothing wrong with her character setting. However, Arthur, the target of the strategy, hated humans. Therefore, she would probably suffer a lot in the early stages when the favorability did not increase. After Wei Wei Bai was dragged out, she was dizzy and on the verge of fainting. However, she was still lying on the ground with her head raised. Her eyes were fixed on these people. The calmness and determination in her eyes even scared some of them away. "Bitch, what are you looking at? You're just a slut who offended the prince, and you still don't know your mistake." A man rushed over, the iron rod in his hand raised high, and the rod came crashing down. Wei Wei Bai would be paralyzed even if she didn't die. /save button at the bottom to record this reading. Chapter 904. All of a sudden, a finger as pale as a bone grabbed the iron rod. The man holding the iron rod was instantly flung away. All the humans took a deep breath. When they saw who it was, they immediately knelt down and kowtowed humbly, not daring to make a sound. It was like a completely different person from the previous, bearing fangs and brandishing claws. This was a human, bullying the weak and kneeling in front of the strong. Wei Wei Bai's blood-stained eyelashes trembled. Her fingers dug into the ground as she breathed heavily and looked up at him. He stood elegantly in front of her, a faint smile on his cold and handsome face. "Are you begging for mercy, little darling?" Wei Wei Bai trembled, biting her lips and not making a sound. Arthur stretched out his leg and stepped on her hand. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but cry out in pain. She curled up into a ball, looking indescribably pitiful. Arthur cruelly asked again, "Beg for mercy?" Wei Wei Bai didn't make a sound. He was clearly so strong and calm. She was battered and exhausted, weak and petty. But her attitude didn't satisfy him, because her eyes didn't yield to him at all. Arthur laughed coldly. "Look around you, those who bullied you are all humans. If you are like them, you don't need to be bullied and can bully others." Then he saw his little prey, and his expression changed. Her eyes seemed to be struggling, and her eyelashes trembled even more. The anxiety in Arthur's heart disappeared a little. He tempted, "Beg for mercy, I will forgive you. You are the most valuable human here, you can kill all those who bullied you." Wei Wei Bai suddenly looked up, anger flashing in her eyes. Her voice was almost broken. "Do you think you can control everyone's fate just because you're a high and mighty member of the Blood Clan?" Arthur's face darkened, and he stomped his foot. Wei Wei Bai screamed. His voice was so soft that it made people's scalps numb. "I don't know if I can control everyone, but at least I can control your fate." Wei Wei Bai sneered. With her face covered in blood, she was incredibly stubborn. Arthur smelled the sweet scent of blood in the air, which made him start to feel impulsive. Suddenly, a weak hand grabbed onto his trousers. He was overjoyed. She was going to give in. But in the next moment, he heard her hoarse and cold voice. "You can't. You can kill me, but you can't make me obey you. My soul is not yours." The system expressed that this kind of shameful Chinibu line was extremely awkward. Would there really be people who would gain favorable impression points after hearing such words? Ding, the male lead's favorability is -20. Wei Wei Bai's expression did not change. Her face could be disfigured, but her character could not be messed up. If one were to say that it was a beautiful little white flower facing the sun, it would be so white that it would be crazy, so white that it would explode, so white that it would be like the Virgin Mary Sue. Her face glowed with unimaginable beauty. Even if humans have an ugly side, they are mostly kind and beautiful. Her voice was so firm. It was as if this was her religion. "Not everyone is willing to submit to you invaders. Not everyone." Her eyes glowed brighter and clearer than the afternoon sun. Arthur's breathing stopped. He looked down at her, his body tense. An impulse crazily surged up from his back. It was excitement, it was a terrifying desire. He finally knew why he was not interested in any creature. Because he wanted something perfect, something pure. And today, he had found it. Wei Bai completely ignited the passion that had been sealed in his body for 100 years. It made his false calmness completely collapse. He wanted to conquer her. This was what his genetic hunting instinct was telling him. Arthur slowly bent down like an elegant gentleman, but his next action was frighteningly violent. He grabbed her long hair, forcing her to look up. He knelt down on one knee, lowering his head to kiss her bloody lips. Her bloody lips that were filled with gravel were so delicious that it made his pupils contract. He left her lips, his beautiful eyes narrowed, like a viper's, gorgeous and cold. No, you are wrong. There is no kind and beautiful human. If there is, I will crush her. You will succeed in attracting my attention. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at -10. System, both the male and female lead's awkward lines were off the charts. It suddenly felt a bit of despair towards this world. ////// Chapter 905. Wei Bai didn't feel anything about the system's despair. She just felt that a vampire who had lived for a long time still had such a pure personality. It was indeed a problem. Pure, yes, this was the feeling she had when she observed Arthur. She found that this man was surprisingly persistent about clean things, to the point of being a little perverted. At first, she was just trying to see if her character setting was right. So the character setting was actually a little too much. Most normal people wouldn't have this kind of reaction. But he actually ate this kind of character setting. Fuck, this guy had lived so many years in a dog's stomach. He was so full of chinibu, but he hadn't been extinct. She opened her eyes and found herself lying in a coffin. The cold coffin, the gorgeous red velvet cushion, and the pattern of roses entwined with branches. Wei Bai didn't know where to put her limbs. Then she found that the wounds from the beating, and even her sprained ankle, had healed. This coffin seemed to have a healing effect on humans. Wei Bai reached out and pushed open the black lid of the coffin with difficulty. She climbed out of the coffin. It was still daytime. But all the heavy curtains in the huge castle were closed. According to the information, although the vampires in this plane were not afraid of sunlight, silver crosses, and garlic. They even breathed, because they could catch the smell in the air when they breathed, and it was easier for them to catch prey. But they still came out at night and didn't like the sun. Then she saw that beside the small black coffin. It was actually a huge white coffin. It was the typical Western style of coffin. The white coffin was like a white skeleton in the dark room, shining with an unsettling luster. And on the top of the coffin, there were actually snake and bat patterns. Previously, she was busy escaping and observing the character setting set by Arthur, so she didn't pay much attention to her surroundings. In the end, she saw towering stone windows, a huge empty room, and a coffin on a blood-red carpet. It really had some of the temperament of the vampire world. But when she looked at the information, it showed that the humans outside could already travel around in cars and planes. And vampires were the mounts of all kinds of magical creatures. Good nerves, a good mix of a world. When Bai Wei saw the white coffin, she carefully stepped barefoot across the red carpet and walked over. She found that the coffin was very quiet, and the vampire inside seemed to be asleep. She heaved a sigh of relief. In the silent room, this low gasp was very obvious. The man in the white coffin suddenly opened his eyes. A deep red color appeared in the depths of his pupils. This kind of red was abnormal. Years of hunger caused him to fall into a terrifying predatory state. He always used deep sleep to counteract this hunting instinct. He hadn't slept for 3 days. Yesterday, it was to punish the blood servant. But today, it was woke up. Bai Weiwei didn't realize what she had woken up. She bit her lip and looked at the door helplessly. She couldn't push open this heavy, terrifying, and gorgeous door. What kind of weird door was this? Why was it so heavy? She reached out, tried to push, and tried to pull. His hands were numb, and he couldn't move them at all. Suddenly, she felt a chill on her back, as if she was being watched. She didn't even hear the sound of the coffin opening. An incomparably pale hand suddenly appeared on her shoulder. /download. Chapter 906. The humans stood at the back obediently, bowing their heads, not daring to speak. Most of the vampire servants did not dare to speak either. The woman standing at the front was wearing a gorgeous rococo dress. She had long blonde hair and beautiful red eyes. She bowed and opened her fan. "Your Highness, do you want to have a blood feast? Why did you suddenly call us here?" She was the castle's housekeeper, Countess Liz. Arthur ignored her and used a fork to fork a piece of cut beef. "Eat." His tone was like feeding a pet, casual but with a hint of undetectable affection. Bai Weiwei frowned. The smell of blood at the tip of her nose made her very uncomfortable. She suddenly waved her hand and hit his cold and pale fingers. The bloody piece of beef flew out. Arthur's face turned cold. He narrowed his red eyes and broke the fork in his hand. He reached out and pinched her chin, forcing her to look up at him. The young girl's face was warm. The beautiful color of blood was very obvious on her cute face. But her eyes did not have the slightest longing for the blood breeds. There was even a trace of vanity and pride. Becoming the prince's blood servant. What a glorious thing. But she was disgusted. Her clear eyes were like a pool of water, one could see the bottom with one look. Maybe with lust, her eyes were not beautiful anymore. Arthur's heart suddenly relaxed and could not help but forgive her disrespect. "You don't like meat? Then drink some soup." Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased by 2. Weiwei Bai said, "There's actually a market for this kind of pretentious and outdated little white flower mistress who only knows how to go against you." "I'm so touched." The system said, "Male leads are always different." Weiwei Bai said, "I'm not talking to you." Scram. She wanted to cut ties with this retarded system. The system silently retreated to the corner, biting on its handkerchief and crying. It was despised by the host. But Liz, the housekeeper, looked at Weiwei Bai coldly. The disgust in her eyes was obvious. Weiwei Bai of course felt the disgust. She was a little excited. The supporting female lead who was going against her was simply a rare animal. It had been a long time since she had seen one. Before she could think of how to make use of this supporting female lead, Liz's expression suddenly changed. She fell down heavily and curled up, screaming in pain. "Weiwei Bai, ? Rise screamed, "Your Highness, I was wrong, please spare me." Arthur was indifferent. He even smiled. "Where did you go wrong?" Liz crawled up from the ground in fear and knelt down, her face twisted in fear as she said, "I shouldn't have put your blood servant in your room without permission." The absolute suppression of the vampires. For a prince to kill a count, even the slightest bit of killing intent was enough to make her feel a tearing pain that was worse than death. She was completely suppressed by Arthur. Arthur, on the other hand, acted as if he had done nothing. His posture was elegant and relaxed, and his fingers gently stroked Weiwei Bai's hair. It was as if he was stroking a pet that he loved. "Since you know you're wrong, why aren't you crawling over?" Liz didn't dare to disobey and immediately crawled over to the table. She lowered her head and revealed an ugly smile. "Your Highness, I promise I won't make such a low-level mistake next time. Please forgive Liz this time." She was ingratiating and humble. Compared to the arrogant person who had just entered, she was like a completely different person. Arthur's voice was gentle, but it made people feel numb with coldness. "Kiss my feet." Liz was stunned. Then she lowered her head and impatiently licked Arthur's feet. "Arthur, who said you could lick my feet?" Download the at https://m/sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Chapter 907. A vampire's body could be said to be impenetrable. She almost bit off her teeth, but she did not even leave a mark on his body. So Wei Wei Bai bit and fell asleep. It could not be helped. The consequence of excessive blood loss was that the body was especially tired. When she woke up, it was daytime. This time, she was not lying in the coffin, but sleeping on the bed. The human maid immediately came over, respectfully and obediently combed her hair and changed her clothes. Then, they served her human food. Wei Wei Bai was hungry, and the food was too delicious, so she ate while pretending to be tasteless. This conflicted look made it seem like she was eating in pain. Others did not dare to have any disrespectful thoughts towards her. A blood servant who could survive in Prince Arthur's room, and who could make Countess Liz kneel down and kiss her feet. This kind of status of a blood servant was not something they could be jealous of. After Wei Wei Bai finished eating, she calmly asked for a book. She also had to study in this world, and she was still a student in an aristocratic school. She would graduate next year. Wei Wei Bai began to read and write a thesis. The thesis was on the effective way to deal with cruel vampires. She finally understood Arthur's character. It was one thing to be a Chinibu, but he preferred people who could constantly go against him. Maybe it was because the vampire years were too boring, so he developed this kind of ghost behavior that constantly pursued excitement. Wei Wei Bai was very calm, and boldly continued to provoke him. In fact, she dared to do so because of her blood. After all, an anorexic vampire boss suddenly caught a prey that could only provide high-quality delicious blood. To put herself in his shoes, if it was a human anorexic. When they were starving to death, a food suddenly appeared that they could eat and find delicious. That kind of food was the savior of the human race. That was why Arthur did not want to kill her for the time being, so she could be so lively and offend him. By Wei Wei's side, so many planes, the one who needs the most abuse is the target. The system hesitated whether to say anything. Wei Wei Bai seemed to know what the system was thinking. Shut up. The system, which was despised by the host, suddenly felt very sad. It decided to eat a lot to relieve its sadness. It pulled out the shopping cart. System popcorn, system dried mango, and rose biscuits. When Wei Wei Bai finished reading the book, she had just started writing her thesis. During dinner, someone suddenly asked for an audience. It was a human, and someone that the original owner knew because Arthur was still asleep. The maid didn't dare to make a decision, but she also didn't dare to offend Wei Wei Bai, who was favored. Therefore, she had no choice but to inform Wei Wei Bai that someone had told her that something had happened to her younger brother. Wei Wei Bai said in surprise, "My little brother." She recalled the original owner's information. She did have a younger brother. Gambling was his second nature, and his personality was extremely bad. The original owner was able to go to an elite school not because of her family's wealth, but because the original owner had excellent grades. He was always the first in his year and looked down on all the other students. This also allowed the elite school to waive her tuition fees, accommodation, and meals. However, she had lost both her parents. His family was poor and only had a deadbeat younger brother who drank and gambled every day. If this kind of younger brother came to find his older sister, it definitely wouldn't be a good thing. Wei Wei Bai sighed. This family background really was a must-have for a little white flower. Then she thought about it and calculated the time that Arthur would wake up. She felt that it was just enough time for her to do something. Although going against him did make Arthur feel excited and curious, he didn't know what to do. Chapter 908. But life had to be adjusted. Stimulation was the main thing, and flirting was the secondary. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, blinked, and adjusted her state of mind. Panic immediately appeared in her eyes. Then she got up and hurried out. The maid followed behind her. "Miss, where are you going? You can't leave." Steward Liz was punished and was confined in the dungeon. So the rest of the maids didn't dare to do anything to Wei Wei Bai. After all, Arthur's attitude towards her was too special. Everyone was afraid of ending up like Liz, so their attitude towards her was trembling with fear. Wei Wei Bai frowned and said coldly, "Don't follow me, and I'm a free person. It's your business if you want to be a vampire, a slave, or a servant, but I don't care." This was a suicidal line. She would definitely offend people. The maids' eyes immediately changed, and their faces darkened. If it weren't for Wei Wei Bai's identity, they would have torn her apart. Bai Weiwei expressed that this pure and strong little white flower persona should have said such words that deserved a beating. Then she ran out of the castle without hesitation. The maids looked at each other, not knowing if they should stop her. After all, they were new human maids, and they were only here to serve Wei Wei Bai. And in less than 2 days, they were scared out of their wits by Liz's fate. They had never seen a blood servant who was so unlike a blood servant. Wei Wei Bai didn't think that she would be able to leave the castle so smoothly. She looked back, and the huge, brightly lit castle towered in the darkness. It was grand and exquisite. The system finally dared to speak carefully. The male lead woke up and is looking at you from behind the curtains. Wei Wei Bai didn't ask the system to shut up again. In fact, compared to the first time, the system was more reliable. What made her even angrier was the unreliability of the system. This time, it was a mistake, but next time, she might even lose her life. She really had lost her integrity. She still remembered the first time she transmigrated. She couldn't even bear to give up her first kiss. The panicked expression on Wei Wei Bai's face became even more obvious. She didn't look back. With her back to the huge window upstairs, she fled the castle without hesitation. It was as if the castle was filled with evil spirits, making her want to disappear immediately. Above the castle, beside the largest window, a pale hand rested on the windowsill. Because he had rested and had enough blood in his body, his pupils had turned into a beautiful black color. That pair of black eyes was staring at the fleeing little figure. Half of Arthur's face was hidden in the shadows. The smile on his face was cold and evil. A small bat flew to his shoulder. He instructed softly, "Follow this naughty little prey." The bat immediately flew out. Arthur turned around and walked into the room. It was enough to let the bats chase after a human. It was not enough for him to go out personally. He walked into the room and saw a small black coffin beside the white coffin. He stopped in his tracks. This coffin should have been thrown out. But he had actually forgotten to give the order. Arthur casually extended his finger and touched his cold face. "Forget it, I'll just keep it." After all, this coffin would remind him of that ecstasy. The pleasure he had never experienced was like a landslide or a tsunami. No wonder so many vampires would fall for this kind of thing. Arthur narrowed his deep and cold black eyes dangerously. When would he catch his little prey again? When the time came, he would taste her delicious blood. And possess her. That would definitely be an extremely gorgeous banquet. When Arthur thought of this, he couldn't wait. He felt the direction in which she fled. The blood in her body was wrapped around his mark. It was useless even if she ran to the end of the world. / For convenience next time, you can click on the button below to record this reading record. Chapter 909. She didn't want to catch him personally. Arthur returned to the window. He casually stepped out of the window, and a giant bat rushed out to catch his feet. Then it carried him into the dark night. Wei Bai saw this familiar scene. This familiar line. And this familiar tacky bully. She was speechless for a moment. Your brother owes us 100,000 gold coins. If he doesn't pay up today, we'll take his life. The bully said with a cold smile. Her brother, on the other hand, was crying and kneeling on the ground, saying, Sister, you're a student of an aristocratic school. You must know a lot of rich people. You can definitely borrow money to save me. This scumbag of a brother. And this plane has taxis, trains, and planes. Why is the currency not RMB but gold coins? Wei Bai said with pity, what's the use of killing him? He can't pay up. Why don't you take out his kidney? It's worth at least 5,000 gold coins. His heart is worth 8,000 gold coins. His lungs, liver, whatever. While they're still fresh, you can find a good buyer and get at least tens of thousands of gold coins. The bullies looked at her in shock. The knives in their hands even trembled and they stuttered, that's scary. The brother's face was also pale. He looked at Wei Bai in shock. The bully and the brother had the same look in their eyes. It was like looking at a demon. Wei Bai suddenly laughed innocently, I'm just kidding, ha. Bully and brother, damn it, we can't laugh at all. She said it like it was real. The system was calm as the wind, the male lead is coming. Wei Bai's face changed immediately. Her smile disappeared and her eyes reddened. She rushed over, squatted down and hugged her scumbag brother who was kneeling. Don't hurt my brother. I'll pay you back. Don't hit him. The bullies held their knives and were dumbfounded, the fight hasn't even started yet. Wei Bai trembled, but her eyes stubbornly looked at the bullies. How can you treat him like this? He's just an immature child. Brother, I'm an adult. Bully, godlike child. There will be retribution for treating my little brother like this. Wei Bai got up, pulled her brother, and ran without hesitation. She turned around and said to her brother with a strong face, Xiao Bai, let's run. Mommy asked me to take care of you. I can't let anything happen to you. Her brother had a look of, where am I? Where am I going? Didn't he want her to pay the debt? Why did he run away? If they ran away, those debt collectors would definitely beat them to death. Only then did the bullies react. They all started cursing. That son of a bitch. He even said that his sister was rich. So he wanted to take the opportunity to escape. The evil tyrant immediately chased after him. Wei Bai grabbed brother Xiao Bai tightly as she ran left and right. The bully shouted from behind with a knife in his hand. It's only right and proper to pay one's debts. If you don't pay back what you owe, I'll chop you down on sight. If you don't pay me back, I'll hang myself in front of your house. The corners of Wei Bai's mouth twitched. She almost laughed out loud at the last sign. She bit her lips to suppress her laughter. Her lips were about to be bitten through. After much difficulty, she finally found a dead end. It wasn't easy. She had run for a few streets before she finally found a dead end. She was so touched that she was about to cry. Looking at the dead end, Wei Wei Bai's eyes dimmed. She was in despair. Her brother finally had a chance to speak. Sister, why are you running? I owe so much money and don't pay it back. They will kill me. Wei Wei Bai's body trembled as her face turned pale. I won't let anything happen to you. /save button to record this reading. Chapter 9-10. The bully had also caught up. You can run so fast. Does your sister train in track and field at an aristocratic school? Wei Wei Bai immediately pulled her brother behind her and blocked the bully. My brother can't owe you so much money, you must be lying to him. The bully waved his knife. Your brother is a gambling addict, who doesn't know that he owes so much money. He said that you have money, so hurry up and take it out. Wei Wei Bai clenched her fingers and said with a trembling voice, I don't have that much money, how can you not understand our family situation? The bully sneered, your brother said that you've caught the eye of a vampire. Go sleep with him for a few nights, won't you get 100,000 gold? They did not know that Wei Wei Bai had caught the eye of a prince. They only thought that she was an ordinary vampire. But as long as she was a vampire, it would be much easier to return the money. Wei Wei Bai's face turned pale as she turned to look at her brother. Xiao Bai, did you really say that to them? Her brother finally had a chance to speak and he immediately shook off Wei Wei Bai's hand. He coldly said, Sister, why are you running away? I owe you so much money. If you've really caught the eye of a vampire, shouldn't you hurry up and climb into a vampire's bed and then get me the money? Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly. Her face was completely pale and under the moonlight, there was a heartbreaking sadness. Her lips trembled. Xiao Bai, do you miss me that much? I worked so hard to get first place in school, wasn't it all so that after graduation, I could have a good job so that our lives would be better? Her brother disdainfully said, how good can it be, what can you give me? A luxury car or a villa, don't joke. A vampire should be grateful to have a chance to be on the list. Wei Wei Bai had a face of disbelief, but vampires harm us humans. Her brother waved his hand and fiercely pushed her. Don't say things that will get me killed. You're so stupid. I owe you so much money. You must know a lot of vampires in school. You're so pretty, why don't you go and seduce one? Wei Wei Bai, this younger brother is so fresh and refined. It's really rare. She staggered back a few steps and looked at her brother in a daze. How can you say that? I want to protect you. The younger brother revealed a ferocious expression. If you want to protect me, hurry up and give me 100,000 gold coins. If I owe them so much money, they will beat me to death. Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't take it anymore. She gasped and angrily said, how could I have 100,000 gold coins? Even if I sold myself, I wouldn't have that much. These words reminded the slag brother. His eyes immediately lit up as he grabbed her hand and pushed her to the ground. Wei Wei Bai did not notice and her body fell heavily to the ground. Her arm was scratched and blood flowed out. The younger brother immediately pointed at his sister excitedly. My sister is the student with the best grades in the aristocratic school. This identity is valuable enough. The bully didn't react. The younger brother continued, that's right, she's very pretty. I don't know how many love letters she's received since she was young. The bully finally realized something. They all looked down at Wei Wei Bai. She was helplessly lying on the ground. Her brown curly hair was scattered. Her light brown eyes were as cute and charming as a cat's eyes. She was wearing an elegant long dress. Although she was a bit embarrassed, she was so delicate and beautiful that it made people's eyes heat up. The slag brother saw that there was hope for him to return the money. Although I can't sell it for 100,000 gold coins, it's definitely enough to repay the interest. When I win the bet, I'll return the rest. Wei Wei Bai stared at her brother in a daze. TXT. Chapter 9-11. The bully sneered, "That's good, your sister is quite popular." Wei Wei Bai finally realized something. She struggled to get up, wanting to escape. But it was too late. The trash brother rushed over and grabbed her arm. "Sister, didn't you want to save me? If you go with these people, you'll be saving my life." Wei Wei Bai looked at him with a face of shock and disappointment. "Xiao Bai, do you know what you're saying?" The trash brother repeated without hesitation, "Sell you to repay the debt. You're so beautiful, you can live a good life after a few times." Wei Wei Bai, "Stop saying I'm beautiful, although it's true, it's still embarrassing." She said to the system, "This brother is so cute, he knows how to appreciate my beauty." System, silence was not its intention, it really had nothing to say. The bully rushed over, grabbed Wei Wei Bai's arm and dragged her away. "Okay, I'll let you go this time, your sister can be used to repay the debt." Wei Wei Bai struggled powerlessly, she was dragged away just like that. However, her eyes were fixed on her younger brother. The pain of being betrayed by her family made her bright eyes lose their final luster. It was as if all the beauty in the world had been shattered. The bullies pushed Wei Wei Bai forward. After walking a few streets, she suddenly staggered a few steps and fell to the ground. The bully immediately said fiercely, "Hurry up and stand up, don't play tricks, you can't run away." Wei Wei Bai lowered her head, her long hair covering her face. She thought expressionlessly, that Chinibu still didn't come out. Looks like it wasn't exciting enough. Wei Wei Bai obediently stood up, but in the next second, she took the opportunity and rushed into the alley. Very good, this time it was a dead end. The bullies immediately blocked her, angrily pushing her against the wall. "Bitch, you still want to run, if I don't break your legs, you won't be honest." One of the bullies wanted to stab Wei Wei Bai's leg with a knife. In the end, Wei Wei Bai did not struggle. She just stared blankly at the knife that was coming at her. She didn't even dodge. Her expression was still and lifeless, as if she had given up on everything. In the next second, the knife suddenly froze. A hand as pale as bone, slender and exquisite as a work of art, lightly grasped the knife. The blade was sharp, but it didn't leave a single mark on that hand. Under the cold moonlight, his silver hair fluttered like flowing water. Bully was stunned. In the next second, he was sent flying and crashed heavily into the wall, spitting out blood. That elegant and slender figure stood in front of Wei Wei Bai. He held a knife in his hand, and his voice was indifferent. "I heard that you have a good item. How much is it? I want to buy it." The remaining bullies saw him descend from the sky, his inhuman strength, and his silver hair. Everyone immediately felt their scalps go numb. They knelt down and kowtowed, "Sir, if you want it, I'll give it to you. It won't cost a single gold coin." He was a member of the Blood Clan. And he was a noble vampire. They were just humans. How could they dare to raise their heads in front of a vampire? Arthur revealed a gentle smile, but his eyes were as cold as a demon's. "Oh, my people are actually not worth a single gold coin. You really have no taste." Those people widened their eyes in shock. Wei Wei Bai was actually a high-level vampire. They immediately knew that they were in trouble and were about to beg for mercy. But a cold snort sounded in the air. It wasn't a laugh, but the sound of a knife cutting through flesh and blood splashing. Slash. Chapter 9-12. Those bullies didn't even have time to blink. Arthur's figure was like the wind, flashing past like a phantom. In an instant, everyone's throats were slit and they died. In the dark alley, the smell of blood filled the air. Arthur threw away the knife in his hand and said with disdain, what a disgusting stench. He turned around and said with some pride, "Look, I've killed all the people who bullied you." Wei Wei Bai sat by the wall in a daze, staring at him with eyes full of fear. At this moment, this vampire who killed people was a demon in her eyes. Arthur's heart, which had been jumping for joy, suddenly turned cold. A trace of blood appeared in his black eyes. This would happen when vampires were emotionally unstable. He slowly walked in front of her and reached out his hand to grab her chin, forcing her to look up at him. "What, are you scared? I'm taking revenge for you." Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. The tears in her eyes suddenly fell. When it fell on the back of Arthur's hand, the scalding temperature made his fingers tremble. Then she slapped his hand away and said with clenched teeth, "You're the one who's addicted to killing. Don't use me as a reason for you to kill people." "I feel disgusted." Arthur's expression froze. His cold black eyes were dyed red and suddenly turned into a furious blood-red color. His back was facing the moonlight. His delicate face was full of evil charm, like a demon in the dark night, with a chilling sharpness. "Disgusting." His voice deepened, and there was a hint of evil in it. It was indescribably gorgeous. A product saying that its owner is disgusting? "You're a cheap product that I can buy without spending a single gold coin." He tilted his head and smiled maliciously. "Speaking of which, 100,000 gold coins is not a small amount. Your poor little brother will have his limbs cut off and fed to the dogs." His fingers greedily caressed her smooth face. "Your brother is a sensible person. With your face, you can earn quite a bit of money by sleeping with the vampires a few more times." The fear in Wei Wei Bai's eyes deepened, but more than that, there was a fragile heartbreak. Her younger brother, her closest family member. He had betrayed her. Arthur had been watching her from above and saw with his own eyes how she was betrayed. He looked at the despair in her eyes with interest. The more desperate she was, the more she realized that only by being by his side could someone protect her. "Isn't that right?" Arthur saw the tears in her eyes finally fall unwillingly. Sparkling and translucent tears fell from her eyes drop by drop. But she was expressionless, stubbornly silent. Arthur's heart actually surged with irritation. He pursed his lips and was just about to pull her back. However, Wei Wei Bai broke free from his grip. A cold look appeared on Arthur's face. She wanted to run again. But in the next second, he was stunned. Wei Wei Bai pulled down her collar and expressionlessly took off her skirt. Under the moonlight, her naked white body was flawlessly beautiful. Arthur stood in place, and for the first time, shock appeared in his blood-red eyes. Then he looked at her as she walked step by step in front of him. Her long brown hair fell on her white back, making her look like a snow-colored fairy under the moonlight. She raised her pure white neck and said in a soft voice, "Then if I sleep with the honorable prince for a night, how many gold coins can I get?" Arthur's throat tightened, but it wasn't because of desire. Instead, it was an indescribable irritation and discomfort. Her body was trembling too much, and her eyes were filled with despair and sadness, but she gave up and put on a charming face. She really was an eyesore. Arthur suddenly took off his coat and covered her entire body. He angrily hugged her and then jumped onto the bat. He coldly said to the person in his arms, "What a disappointment. Let's go home." She quietly laid in his arms, but his chest was soaked with her tears. He had clearly bullied her to the point of despair. But he couldn't feel happy at all. Or was it because the person who bullied her wasn't him? Arthur felt her cold shivering, and he couldn't help hugging her even tighter. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 10/. Chapter 9:13. Halfway through, he turned back. He didn't even have time to find clothes for her. He tore off a large piece of curtain and wrapped her tightly from head to toe. Then, he suddenly disappeared. Not even an afterimage could be seen. Liz was finally released from confinement and walked out tiredly. She saw her noble prince appear in front of her. "Get me a few human doctors as fast as you can." Liz was stunned. She found that Wei Wei Bai in his arms was silent. Arthur glanced sideways and gave her a fierce and furious look. "What are you waiting for? Get out of here." Liz was so scared that she took a few steps back and immediately turned to run. Of course, she knew why she had to catch them. Because it was the fastest. There was no need to dawdle. After the human doctors were caught, Liz saw Arthur squatting by the bed, holding Wei Wei Bai's hand and staring at her face. The doctors trembled as they walked over, even forgetting to salute. However, Arthur ignored all of this and stepped aside to let the doctor pass. This was something that would never happen in the past. Liz's lips trembled, but she didn't dare to remind the doctors that it was disrespectful to let a prince back away. The doctors checked and immediately rushed to the hospital to get the blood transfusion equipment and blood bags. One of the doctors said, excessive blood loss and malnutrition caused the temperature to drop. Blood must be transfused immediately. Arthur stood aside, pursed his lips and repeated softly, excessive blood loss. The doctor immediately replied respectfully, "Yes, Your Highness." Because of excessive blood loss in a short period of time, and because the patient's body is weak, she should have been in a state of not eating for a long time. That's why such a serious situation occurred. Arthur, not eating enough. And it was for a long time. There were still people who didn't eat enough in this day and age. Prince Arthur, who knew nothing about life at the bottom, was confused. His inherent beliefs were impacted. After the blood transfusion, it was already dawn. Wei Wei Bai's breathing also stabilized and her face looked better. The sunlight shone in from the window and shone on her body, making her look warm. Arthur didn't mind the sunlight. He sat beside her, propped his chin on his hand, and squinted at her. When her eyelashes trembled, her tense heart suddenly relaxed. Then, he saw her open her eyes. Her beautiful eyes were filled with light and incomparably bright. She seemed to be puzzled as she looked up. Suddenly, she thought of something and turned to look at him. Arthur sat up straight, his movements deliberately elegant. He said condescendingly, "You're awake. Why didn't you tell me that you lost a lot of blood? I could have sucked your blood later." Was he that scary? It was very painful for humans to lose too much blood. But she stubbornly endured it without making a sound. If it wasn't for the fact that she couldn't take it last night and he had done it with her, she would have been tormented to death. Wei Wei Bai looked at him strangely. Her lips moved and her voice was a little hoarse. "Were you the one who took care of me last night?" Arthur crossed his arms and put them under his chin. He nodded. "Why? Are you touched? I've been guarding you all night." Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but smile mockingly. Arthur thought that she was going to scold him again. But she suddenly said softly, "Thank you." Arthur paused for a while before blinking, as if he was suspecting that he had heard something unbelievable. "Thank you." He could not believe that he would hear such a sentence from his little prey. He thought that she was going to resist to the end. After Wei Wei Bai said this, she turned her face and didn't look at him anymore. Chapter 9:14. Suddenly, a hand gently caressed her face. "What, isn't it too simple to say thank you? If you really want to thank me, you should at least do something." Wei Wei Bai angrily glared at him. "What do you want?" "My blood is valuable, so you can keep sucking it." Arthur lowered his head and moved closer to her, speaking in an incomparably deep voice. "Give me a kiss as a thank you gift." Wei Wei Bai's fingers tightly gripped the sheets. You really are shameless. Arthur was only teasing her. He would rather see her this angry than see her coldly lying down. He gave an indifferent smile and was about to leave. A warm kiss lightly fell onto his cheek. Arthur's movements stopped as if he couldn't react. After Wei Wei Bai finished kissing him, she laid back down and no longer paid attention to him. Arthur was sluggish for a few seconds before returning to normal. He calmly said, I heard that you haven't eaten enough for a long time. From today onwards, I will watch your diet, starting from now. After saying this, he turned around and ordered the maid to bring in food. After everything was done, he was stunned in place. His fingers couldn't help gently touching his cheek that was kissed. His chest seemed to have been hit by something. He touched his chest in confusion. It was a bit stuffy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. What was going on? He turned around and met her eyes that were secretly looking at him. She was surprised and immediately turned her head away, pretending that she wasn't looking at him. Arthur's eyes lit up and his lips couldn't help curling into a smile. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Arthur brought over some soft food that was easy to eat and walked to the side of the bed. Then he personally picked up the spoon, scooped up some, and brought it to her mouth. Come, eat something. He didn't seem to think that there was anything wrong with his appearance. Wei Wei Bai strangely looked at him. She reached out, wanting to take the spoon in his hand. Arthur calmly moved his fingers away, not letting her touch it. Then he stubbornly brought the food to her mouth. Eat. Wei Wei Bai stared at him for a while before finally bowing her head and swallowing the food in the spoon. The way she ate was very quiet and unhurried. It was Arthur's first time feeding someone, and he actually felt pleasure. He had never experienced such a feeling before. Seeing that she was almost done eating, Arthur said calmly, I've already captured your brother and locked him up in the dungeon. Do you plan to sell him to a vampire as a slave, or torture him to death? Wei Wei Bai froze and looked at him in disbelief. Why did you capture my younger brother? Arthur picked up a strawberry and brought it to her lips. Here, eat. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and did not eat. Arthur was very patient. He held the strawberry in his hand and waited. He was like an elegant gentleman waiting for the girl he liked to dress up and give him a sweet kiss. Under the light of the day, his eyes were shining brightly. There was even a soft smile on her face. Enchanting and profound. Wei Wei Bai's eyes trembled as if she couldn't stand him looking at her like that. She lowered her eyes, opened her lips, and sucked on the strawberry on his finger. Arthur's fingertip was accidentally sucked on by her. The moist and warm contact made Arthur's eyes darken a lot, and there was even a hint of blood. He lowered his eyes to hide the beastly look in them. His little prey's body was too weak now. Moreover, being so dishonest was also a problem. He thought about it all night and prepared a trap for her to jump into. Wei Wei Bai ate the strawberry with an ugly expression, but before she could open her mouth, he handed over another strawberry with a gentle expression, but his actions were domineering. Eat it. Slash. Chapter 9:15. Wei Wei Bai took a few deep breaths before biting the strawberry silently and continuing to eat. Arthur was addicted to the act of feeding her. He smiled and continued to take the strawberry. However, this time, before he could reach her lips, her hand was already tightly gripping his wrist. What are you going to do to my brother? She glared at him angrily. She no longer listened to him obediently but directly questioned him. Arthur's smile deepened. What's wrong? Don't you want to take revenge on your brother who wanted to sell you? He's such a dirty and ugly person. I'll help you vent your anger and torture him to death. Isn't that good? Wei Wei Bai's face showed a struggle. Arthur continued to pressure her lightly. I heard that some bloodlings like men very much, especially torture and abuse. Wei Wei Bai's body trembled, and she grabbed his wrist even harder. He let her grab him, his voice calm and gentle. Anyway, your brother is just a burden to you. Wouldn't it be better if he died? Her information had been in his hands last night. As the best student in the aristocratic school, she had not been able to eat for a long time. It was because she had been using her food expenses to support her brother. When he saw the information, he was so angry that he tore it up one by one. Especially her brother's photo, he personally tore it up. That brother of hers had done a lot of things. Wanting to sell her to pay off his debt was just one of them. But she still took care of that ugly little brother. It was as if to her, that brother of hers was the only person she liked in this world. He was such a strong and beautiful bloodlings, and here he was. She didn't like him. She cared so much about the person who wanted to hurt her. For the first time, Arthur experienced the anger of frustration. The ridicule in his smile became obvious. Why, can't you bear to part with him? Wei Wei Bai's face turned pale, and a trace of determination flashed in her eyes. Let him fend for himself. He owes a debt. If you let him go, he won't have a good ending. Sure enough, she still didn't want her brother to die. Arthur's tone became suppressed. Is it your wish to let him go? Wei Wei Bai said softly, although he is bad, he won't die, let alone, he was sent to the vampires to be tortured. She didn't say this out loud. Arthur had already picked up a strawberry and licked it naturally. This action was surprisingly seductive and seductive. Then, he couldn't help but sneer, what a kind child. Even after being hurt by your younger brother, you still have to think for him. Wei Wei Bai was a little embarrassed. I'm not thinking for him. After all, he's my younger brother and my only family member. My mother asked me to take care of him before she died. Arthur finally spoke coldly, and the suppressed anger in his tone appeared. Enough, don't talk to me about your great sibling relationship. He pressed the licked strawberry against her lips, and his tone became dangerous. Eat it. This action was somewhat insulting. Wei Wei Bai did not open her mouth. She was just about to avoid it. Arthur's words made her completely stop dodging. If you don't listen to me, I'll make your brother's life a living hell. Wei Wei Bai froze. Her eyelashes trembled a few times as she stared at him blankly. He was like a demon as he said word by word, be good, eat it. Wei Wei Bai's lips moved. His fingers had already forcefully stuffed the strawberry into her mouth. She almost choked to death. Arthur grabbed her long hair and casually played with it. It's very simple if you don't want me to kill your brother. From today onwards, you have to obey me absolutely. /save button. Chapter 9:16. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were bloodshot with anger. Why, what if I don't care about my little brother? Arthur revealed a smile. If you don't care about your little brother, then I can't find a way to threaten you. After saying this, his expression became cold and cruel. Have someone go to the dungeon and chop off that dirty human's limbs and bring them here. Just as he finished speaking, his sleeve was fiercely pulled. She suppressed her fear and finally couldn't take it anymore. Don't kill him. Arthur should have been happy that the prey had walked into the trap. But he felt sullen for no reason. His tone was cold. What, are you not going to care? I'll chop him into pieces for you to see. I promise. Arthur snorted, it's too late, I'm going to kill him. He didn't want her to care about her little brother. But he really wanted to kill him. Bai Weiwei suddenly hugged his body with both hands, snuggled into his arms, and buried her face in his neck. Her breathing was disorderly and her voice was trembling. Master, I beg you. The blood slaves respectfully called the vampire that owned them, master. Arthur's eardrums trembled and an itchy feeling spread from the tip of his ear to his neck, reaching his entire body. He suddenly said in a soft voice, "Say it again." Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before softly saying, "Master." Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 25. Arthur lazily reached out and picked a rose ring. The rose-red luster gave off a gorgeous feeling under the candlelight. He sat on the chair and Wei Wei Bai placed her hands on her knees, obediently sitting on his lap with her head down. Arthur picked up her finger and put it on. "Is this all you brought today?" The merchants immediately brought out better gems. "Sir, this is this year's newest gem design. The most expensive one is this brown earth-colored bracelet." Arthur saw the brown gem bracelet, took it, and put it on by Wei Wei's wrist. "Also, this clothing material is the best and most expensive this year. Because the raw material is a natural deep-sea creature, it is not easy to catch. We have produced 3 bolts of cloth this year." The merchants then brought up 3 bolts of resplendent colors. They were so beautiful that they looked like they were flowing with light. Arthur said indifferently, "Stay." The merchant bowed his head respectfully and flattered, "Miss will definitely look good in it." Arthur smiled happily and then put a gorgeous sapphire necklace on Wei Wei Bai. There was an endless stream of merchants. Arthur purposely opened the castle gate. "Let these merchants bring the best goods over." When Arthur put a little pink diamond crown on her head, Wei Wei Bai finally couldn't take it anymore. She pulled the crown off. "That's enough. Am I a jewelry showcase? You've already hung so many things on me." This wasn't a character setting anymore. She was telling the truth. The jewelry bracelets and bracelets on both of her wrists weighed at least 5 kilograms in total. Not to mention the necklace around her neck. Oh right, there was also a jeweled anklet on her ankle. Those who didn't know better would think that she was a jewelry box. No, it was a jewelry box. Arthur picked up a pair of aqua green ear studs, then pushed her long hair aside and put them on her. "My blood slave, how can you be worse than others? I want you to wear the best clothes, wear the best jewels, use the best perfume, and serve me the best." Wei Wei Bai sighed to the system. Can the target's face evolve? One is more shameless than the other. Chapter 9:17. Wei Wei Bai suddenly thought of her scumbag sister. It had been a long time since she thought of her. She hoped that her scumbag sister could live a good life, in case she couldn't hold on until the day she came looking for her with a machete. When Arthur heard her mention her brother, his originally gentle expression suddenly turned cold. He opened the book unhurriedly, and his voice was incomparably calm. "Oh, you want to see your brother?" Wei Wei Bai nervously grabbed the blanket, and her breathing became heavier. She said in a trembling voice, "My brother, is he okay?" Arthur lowered his head, and the smile on his face became slightly sinister. "He's probably fine. If he's strong enough, he can hold on for 10 days to half a month in the dungeon. After all, there are a lot of rats and poisonous snakes there." Wei Wei Bai was shocked, and immediately sat up. She looked at Arthur in panic and said, "There are poisonous snakes, Xiao Bai is most afraid of snakes." Xiao Bai, it was Xiao Bai. Arthur's fingers had already cut the book, and he coldly looked up. "You really like that brother of yours?" Wei Wei Bai's face paled, and she endured for a while before lowering her head and saying sadly, "My mom said that he is the last hope of my family. If something happens to him, my family will have no descendants." The immortal Arthur had a face of confusion. "What do you mean by no descendants?" "Wei Wei Bai, although he did something terrible to me, he is still young, and will mature when he grows up. Scumbag was a little scumbag when he was young. He was an adult scumbag when he grew up. There was no such thing as a good thing that would turn for the better after he matured. Wei Wei Bai didn't even look at Arthur's gloomy face, and continued to defend her brother. Xiao Bai can be very cute sometimes, and thinks of me, and comes to school to visit me every month. The system couldn't help but say, he comes to see you because he wants to spend money. Wei Wei Bai, looking at my money is also looking at me. The system, Arthur finally couldn't take it anymore. He threw away the tattered book in his hand. He stood up, called for the maid, and ordered, "Tell the guards in the dungeon to put a few more snakes in there to eat the rats. Remember to put the poisonous ones." Wei Wei Bai was surprised at first, then she got off the bed in a panic and immediately pulled on his sleeve. "Why did you release the snake?" Arthur turned around coldly and revealed a malicious smile. "There are too many rats in the dungeon. I just want to purify the environment of the dungeon so that your brother can live a better life." Wei Wei Bai's eyes were filled with fear and anxiety. "He's afraid of snakes. Aren't you trying to kill him by putting a snake in there?" Arthur hid his smile and pressed his hand on her shoulder expressionlessly. He lowered his head, his lips almost touching her face. Then, Wei Wei Bai heard his cold voice. "That's right. Wouldn't it be better for such an ugly person to die cleanly?" Bai Weiwei's body stiffened, her expression shocked. She didn't care about the other party's identity as a vampire. She stretched out her hands and grabbed Arthur's collar. "You promised me to let him go as long as I obediently become your blood slave." Arthur looked at the anger rising in her eyes. The insidious anxiety in his heart appeared again. His fingernails couldn't even be controlled and suddenly grew longer. He really wanted to tear this delicate and beautiful face apart. Her expression was really an eyesore. Arthur suddenly lifted her chin, and his sharp nails almost pierced into her skin. Wei Wei Bai felt his cold murderous aura and didn't dare to make a scene. Arthur's nails that had become hard and sharp touched her face with incomparable gentleness. He really wanted to cut off the worry and anxiety on her face. The download address is at https://www.sashu.com. The is at https://sashu.com// To make it easier for you to read it next time, you can click on Save. Chapter 9:18. He sneered and questioned. "If I was thrown into the dungeon, would you be so worried about me?" Wei Wei Bai looked at him in shock, as if she couldn't understand his words. When Arthur uttered this sentence, he was stunned for a moment before realizing how foolish his words were. Why did he care whether she was worried about him or not? And if something really happened to him, what use was there for a human like her to worry? He had always been dismissive of useless things. Before she could understand, Wei Wei Bai had already moved her eyes away with a guilty conscience. She pursed her lips and hesitated for a moment. Then she said with some uncertainty, "Yes, you are my master." These words were said without any confidence. Arthur obviously saw that Wei Wei Bai didn't mean what she said, but that irritating feeling dissipated a little. It was baffling. That was Arthur's evaluation of himself. But he still let go of her chin. He also retracted his fingernails that had grown longer. Then he suddenly turned around and said coldly, "Follow me." Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a few seconds. Then she suddenly thought of something and immediately followed him. The environment of the dungeon was particularly bad. Even if the walls were burning with bonfires, it still couldn't stop the cold and fishy smell. Wei Wei Bai had just entered the dungeon. She heard mournful cries. She was so scared that her face paled a little. Arthur sneered and then said indifferently, "What, you don't want to see your brother? It seems like you're not that worried about him." Wei Wei Bai didn't care about anything else and immediately chased after him. The cold smile on Arthur's face froze for a moment. He turned his head and quickened his pace. This dungeon has a history of 400 years. Countless traitors have died here. I heard that every tile here has blood flowing through it. He introduced her maliciously. As expected, Wei Wei Bai's footsteps paused and she gasped in fear. That's right, a lot of people have died here. I heard that some people died so miserably that their souls haven't dispersed. They are wandering around the dungeon looking for a scapegoat. What a load of nonsense. Under his low voice, there was a kind of sinister and terrifying feeling. Wei Wei Bai, she's afraid of the dark and ghosts, Arthur continued. Most of those ghosts have severed heads and limbs. They cry day and night, and some even have hideous faces. Before he could finish his words, the little prey behind him had already reached out and grabbed the corner of his clothes tightly. She trembled with fear. Her fingers gripped his clothes tightly, refusing to let go. Arthur revealed a mischievous smile, and then walked even faster. She deliberately circled the dungeon 3 times before walking towards her brother's cell. She was like his little tail that he couldn't shake off no matter how hard he tried. Arthur walked triumphantly to the darkest room. Then, he heard the little idiot's cries for help. "Snake, snake, don't come over." He screamed so miserably. Wei Wei Bai immediately let go of his clothes and rushed to the cell door, shouting anxiously, "Xiao Bai, are you okay?" Her anxious look made her look like a perfect example of a madwoman trying to support her younger brother. Xiao Bai immediately rushed to the door, his face twisted in fear. "Sister, quickly save me. There are so many snakes here." Wei Wei Bai had a worried look, but her eyes were very cold. "Xiao Bai, sister is also very worried about you. I'm worried that you're living too well. Sister will save you. Just bear with it. Bear with it until you die." Her voice was so anxious and worried. But the way she looked at Xiao Bai revealed the opposite meaning. Even the smile on her lips wasn't a smile of worry at all, but a smile of schadenfreude. Little White understood what she was trying to say in a moment of fear. He immediately stretched out his hand, reached out through the gap of the door, and grabbed Wei Wei Bai's neck fiercely. Chapter 9:19. "Bitch, you just want to see me die." Wei Wei Bai grabbed his arm anxiously. "Xiao Bai, what's wrong with you? I'm here to save you." Xiao Bai saw through her true colors. "You've seduced a high-ranking vampire, so you're planning to dump me, bitch. If you want to save me, why don't you let me out now?" Wei Wei Bai couldn't make a sound at all. His hands were clutching her too tightly. The system couldn't bear to look at her. "I say, why do you have to make life difficult for a scumbag? You've already used him anyway." Wei Wei Bai looked helpless. "I have no choice. I don't have an evil female supporting lead, nor do I have an affectionate second male lead. With my weak identity as a blood slave, I can't do anything to provoke Arthur." She was also very desperate. If she wanted to shake the heart of a high-ranked vampire, she would have to stir up a storm, stir up the heavens, and stir up the earth. But she only had a scumbag by her side that she could use. Using him once was not enough. Now that environmental protection was being advocated, of course waste had to be used a second time. How to use him? Her slogan was not afraid of old jokes. The older they were, the more classic they were. So the hero saving the damsel in distress joke should be repeated a few more times. Without bullies to bully, wasn't she just catching a scumbag to create a bully? Anyway, her blood was good, and the Chinibu vampire didn't want to starve, so he had to save her. As he saved her, this feeling came out. In this world, she could do whatever she wanted. The system also gave a rare decent hack. Wei Wei Bai's smile disappeared, and the mocking indifference in her eyes turned into fragile despair. Her fingers clasped the scumbag's arm, but gradually lost strength. In the end, her hand slipped, and she didn't struggle at all, letting him choke her. The light of the bonfire flickered. Under the light, she was like a fragile moth, about to stop breathing and fall to the ground at any time. Arthur was originally looking on coldly. He originally wanted to use a spell on that little idiot, to make him attack Wei Wei Bai crazily. He didn't expect that he didn't do anything. Things had happened as he had hoped. This was a lesson for Wei Wei Bai. She had always disobeyed him. If it wasn't for her unique blood, he would have killed her long ago. So, let's be even more desperate. He sneered at her. She was in so much pain that she couldn't hold on any longer and was about to fall to her knees. Arthur's fingernails grew longer again, and even his black eyes were dyed red. He frowned in dissatisfaction, somewhat disappointed at his impulsive personality. He would wait until his little prey was on her last breath before saving her. That was why she was so disappointed in that little idiot. Then, she would be loyal to him. So now was not the time to save her. Just as he was thinking this, he suddenly heard a soft and weak cry for help. Loosen, she had already given up in despair, but she suddenly struggled with all her might. However, her body was weak to begin with, and a woman's strength could not be compared to a man's. That was why her struggle was so insignificant. Arthur looked at him coldly. If he still had the strength to struggle, then he should struggle a little longer. Help, she choked out in fear. Arthur held his breath. His respiratory system was used to catch the scent of his prey. The air was filled with her sweet smell, making him anxious. Even if she asked for help, he wouldn't easily save her. Who asked her to be so disobedient and insist on coming to see this dirty idiot? He didn't know his own mentality at all. It was like jealousy. Wei Wei Bai suddenly gasped for breath. Arthur suddenly looked up, but heard her squeeze out her last breath and say, "Save me, Arthur." His mind went blank for a moment, but he found that his body had suddenly appeared behind Wei Wei Bai. Slash. Chapter 9:20. Arthur even had the thought of strangling her to death. His fingers curled and loosened. When did he become so calculative with a prey? Whether she had forgotten or not, it didn't matter to him at all, did it? Arthur saw the sunlight pouring in from outside and frowned as he got off the bed. Forget it, it was better to rest. The next Sacred Blood Conference was about to begin. He had to replenish his energy as much as possible so that he could deal with the upcoming experiment. Wei Wei Bai saw Arthur turn and leave. She silently despised him, took off her pants, called him Little Wei Wei, put on her pants, and left. Scumbag, beast scumbag, super invincible and shameless scumbag. Arthur, who had suddenly turned and left, suddenly appeared. Wei Wei Bai's expression froze, and she almost couldn't retract the disdain on her face. Without waiting for her to say anything, Arthur had already gotten on the bed and held her tightly in his arms. Wei Wei Bai moved her lips. Arthur ordered coldly, "Sleep." He found the coffin cold and uncomfortable at all. The coffin was even open. He stood there for less than 3 seconds and immediately turned to leave. It was best to sleep with her in his arms. Wei Wei Bai. Damn it, do you want me to sleep for 24 hours? She wanted to protest, but she looked up and opened her mouth to speak. Arthur had already pressed down with a kiss. After he finished kissing, his voice was hoarse. If you don't want to continue what happened last night, be good. Wei Wei Bai trembled and lay in his arms obediently. Arthur immediately rubbed her hair and fell asleep with her in his arms with a satisfied expression. There was nothing wrong with the bed. It was much better than that dark and damned place in the coffin. He had also thought of carrying her into the coffin. But the coffin was custom-made for him alone. Although the two of them could lie in it, it was still not as spacious as a bed. Besides, humans were all afraid of coffins. If she was so scared that she kept trembling, he would feel uncomfortable hugging her. Wei Wei Bai was in a daze as he hugged her. When vampires slept, their bodies were cold and hard. There was no heartbeat, and their skin was still cold. He was lying on such a soft bed, but his back was leaning against a big rock. It was really unbearable. Wei Wei Bai looked out of the window speechlessly and called the system. Ding, the system is dead. Would you like to revive it? Wei Wei Bai was speechless for a moment before she gritted her teeth and said, Revive your grandpa. The host agrees to revive her Sir System. Please give the system a kiss of love, and the system will immediately be revived. Wei Wei Bai said, Just die. Don't revive. It had died of sadness. Arthur noticed that his little prey had been feeling down recently. He gave her jewels, luxurious clothes, groups of servants, and the best food. She's always looked sickly. The only time he was energetic was when he read and studied. Only then did he remember that she was the best student in an aristocratic school. She must have liked to study. Arthur hesitated for a moment before he walked to her side and was about to touch her. However, he found that her body immediately stiffened. His fingers paused in the air. He hesitated for a moment before continuing to touch her shoulder as if nothing had happened. Isn't it too boring to stay in the castle all this time? Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment, not daring to answer. However, Arthur could feel her emotions. She was weak and bored. Even if he gave her a pile of jewels, she would not be happy. He could not help but say, Why don't you go back to school and take a look? He just wanted her to go back for a day trip. Wei Wei Bai misunderstood. She immediately turned around, her eyes shining brightly. You want me to go back to school? Her expectant and longing eyes made Arthur's words stop in his mouth. He was silent for a moment before he said ambiguously, It's right to say that you want to go to school. Going to school for a day also counted as going to school. Suddenly, a soft kiss landed on his cheek like a butterfly. There was no trace of coldness in her eyes. Her smile brightened. Thank you, Arthur. Going to school made her this happy? Arthur was a little stunned. He reached out and touched his face. That kiss was really light. Then, as if he was possessed, he said, If you like to go to school, then go. He could go to school until she graduated. As long as she was this happy, it was fine. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 45. Arthur suddenly frowned. Why did he care so much about whether she was happy or not? Then he saw that the joy on her face could not be suppressed. His brows relaxed again. Forget it, the blood is only delicious when the prey is happy. // Chapter 921. Wei Wei Bai packed up and went to school. There was a reason for going to school. The side mission was too powerful. She looked at the information. She knew that there were some anti-vampire humans in the school. These humans had all entered an alliance called Anti-Vampire. This name, could it be more violent and less attentive? She felt that she could get green by joining this anti-alliance. She was worried sick for the health bar above her head to turn green. Arthur had to rest and sleep during the day. Although his strength increased greatly after drinking her blood, he didn't go crazy during the day anymore. But because of habit, there was nothing special. He wouldn't wake up during the day. Wei Wei Bai carried her bag and was about to leave. Arthur suddenly pressed her shoulder with one hand and pressed her against the wall. Then he lowered his head and looked at her with some dissatisfaction. Wei Wei Bai also looked at him. The two of them looked at each other in a daze. Arthur snorted. What an ingrate. I've been so kind as to let you go to school, but you don't even show any gratitude. Then he lowered his head and asked for a deep kiss that made her blush. He kissed her until she almost collapsed. He asked someone to bring her a jewelry box and put on a beautiful sapphire bracelet and necklace for her. They were the latest and most expensive designs of the year. Wei Wei Bai's school uniform was also remade with a modified material. It looked bright and beautiful, and her long hair was combed to be especially soft and beautiful. What a cute little pet. When she first came, she was like a stray kitten. Now that he had taken care of her, it was obvious that she had an owner and was an especially expensive pet. Wei Wei Bai seemed to be a little resistant, but she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to go to school, so she endured it and let him put it on. Arthur held her face and said softly, "Okay, it's time to let out some fresh air. Remember to come back on time." After saying that, he let go of her and turned to rest. Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. Then she couldn't wait to run out with her bag of books. She didn't miss this damn place at all. With Arthur's keen hearing, how could he not hear her cheerful footsteps? Seriously. Arthur frowned slightly. This little blood servant really didn't know his place at all. He was full of patience and gentleness. She did not feel grateful, nor did she follow him wholeheartedly. She even had the delusion that she shouldn't be allowed to go to school because she kept running out. The aristocratic school was really all kinds of high-end, especially the food in the cafeteria, which was very much to Wei Wei Bai's liking. There are some students in this anti-alliance, and the person with the highest status in the alliance is the student council president of the aristocratic school. The system flipped through the information diligently and explained to Wei Wei Bai. It couldn't be helped. Its host finally had that first night, so it had to take up a responsibility as a system. At least let her be happy in one plane. As a system, it was also worried sick. Wei Wei Bai ate while thinking about how to join the anti-alliance. Then, from the corner of her eye, she saw the dining table not far away. That table was very lively. The president of the student union, Roth, explained some difficult topics to the students beside him while eating. He smiled gently. There was a faint halo around his short black hair. His handsome face leaned towards gentleness. He looked very much like the first love in everyone's dreams when they were young and inexperienced. Wei Wei Bai retracted her gaze and remembered this president in her plan. After she finished eating, she continued with the class and acted like a serious student. After the last class, the professor announced the end of the class. Wei Wei Bai then packed up her books and prepared to leave. However, just as she walked to the school gate, a group of women stopped her. They were her classmates. The female students of the aristocratic school. Chapter 922. Wei Wei Bai looked at them expressionlessly. "What, are you going to invite me to a party for dinner?" A large group of women were blocking her way. She thought that they were here to snatch the bride. Humph, how shameless, stealing Miss Jessie's sea sapphire and still strutting around. A girl spat viciously and said. The rest of the students heard that someone was stealing and could not help but stop to watch. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were blank for a moment, then slowly brightened up. She was excited. Trash, someone's here to pick a fight. System. Trash. Wei Wei Bai, it's rare to meet someone who's picking a fight. I really want to take a picture of it so I can remember it later. System. You, calm down. She felt a little sympathy for the person who came to pick a fight, but any evil female antagonist came to pick a fight. In Wei Wei Bai's eyes, they were all precious animals. She had to watch and enjoy. Wei Wei Bai was very calm, and raised her bracelet in a friendly manner. "The sea sapphire you're talking about, is it this?" She only had this bracelet and the necklace on her neck that were blue. Among the girls, there was a girl wearing a school uniform, with long blonde hair and blue eyes, looking at her elegantly and slightly arrogantly. She gently opened the fan in her hand, and said reservedly and disdainfully, "The sea sapphire is this year's newest design, and also the most expensive one. My brother went through so much trouble to get me one, but because I had to change my clothes, I left it in the changing room and forgot to take it. I didn't expect to lose it." Wei Wei Bai's gentle smile did not change. "Is that so? What a sad thing, there's actually a thief in this damned school." Jessie's eyes turned cold, and the fan fanned even faster. "That's right, shameless, this thief is dirtying my mouth if I were to say her name." Wei Wei Bai casually raised her hand, and flipped her hair, purposely showing off her sea sapphire. Her smile was slightly provocative. "Oh, so you know the thief's name, hurry up and catch her." This attitude was very hateful. Sure enough, there was a female lackey at the scene who immediately exploded. She rushed over and was about to snatch the sapphire from Wei Wei Bai's wrist. "You shameless thief! You're just a lowly woman from the slums. Who doesn't know how poor your family is? How could you have the aquamarine?" Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back to avoid her and faintly raised an eyebrow. "You think I stole it?" Jessie sneered. "Otherwise, where did your sea sapphire come from? Poor people are really lowly things. Our school shouldn't have recruited people like you." The discussions around them grew louder. Most of them believed that Wei Wei Bai had stolen something. Wei Wei Bai smiled and didn't care about this false accusation. Instead, she undid the bracelet and pinched it between her fingers. The sapphire bracelet sparkled. She looked at Jessie coldly, her smile unchanged. "Are you sure this thing is yours?" Jessie frowned. Of course, it wasn't her. After all, such a new gem hadn't been officially released yet. It was just that the blueprint had been released. Only one design had been released, and it was especially precious. She had always hated Wei Wei Bai, this green tea bitch. Recently, the school had been selecting the most outstanding students to get a chance to further their studies. Money couldn't buy it. And Wei Wei Bai was very likely to be promoted because of her excellent results. When she saw Wei Wei Bai come to school in the morning wearing a gem, she immediately thought of framing her. Wei Wei Bai's reputation was tarnished, so this opportunity might fall to her. After all, everyone knew that Wei Wei Bai came from a poor family. She couldn't afford to use a gem unless she was a mistress. Chapter 923. It was enough to spread the name of a thief. It didn't matter if she was wrongly accused. Anyway, even if she was kept, she was just a lowly mistress. No noble would be willing to offend her family for a mistress. So Jessie was fearless. She elegantly raised her neck and looked at Wei Wei Bai coldly. It was as if she was looking at a lowly bug. "Yes, this gem is mine. I can't believe that there is a thief like you in our school." Wei Wei Bai's smile didn't change. Her eyes were encouraging. It was good to find fault with girls. She hadn't seen them for a long time. "Let's have a few more together. Let her warm up." Always facing Arthur, that Chinibu, she was really tired of looking at him. Wei Wei Bai felt that she couldn't be too calm. Otherwise, when the other party saw that she was too calm, it wouldn't be good if they didn't play with her. "I didn't steal. You are wrongly accusing me." Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. She was a little scared and took a step back. Her lips trembled and her face was a little pale. The discussion around them became louder. This was simply a sign of guilt. If she didn't steal, why was she so scared? Jessie looked at it. This gem definitely came from a bad place. The last trace of worry in her heart was put down. She immediately took a few steps forward aggressively. If you didn't steal, then where did you get the money to buy this? Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and stared at her. She opened her mouth but couldn't say anything in the end. It seemed that there was something that was hard to say. Jessie immediately looked around proudly. More than half of the students were watching. The accusation of theft would definitely spread. To make the effect better, Jessie sneered and said loudly, I swear in the name of a noble that the sapphire that Wei Wei Bai is wearing is mine. When this sentence came out, the eyes of the people around changed. After all, a noble's oath was very serious. If they were not careful, their reputation would be ruined. Since Jessie dared to swear like this, then Wei Wei Bai was definitely a thief. Her grades are so good, but her character is so bad. It's disgusting. I'm actually in the same class as a thief. Inform the principal to deal with this and kick her out of school. The crowd surrounded Wei Wei Bai. She stood in the crowd, her face pale and helpless. She muttered, No, I didn't steal. But she couldn't say where her gem came from. The system coughed lightly. Well, it feels good to pretend to be a weak white lotus, doesn't it? Wei Wei Bai covered her face and said weakly, Everyone is wronging me. It feels good. I haven't been wronged in a long time. It's time for me to pretend to be pitiful. The system silently squatted down. Host, your pleasure is too different from others. Are you giving up on yourself now that you've lost your first time? Wei Wei Bai turned her face away and looked around for help. She happened to see the student union president pass by. Roth seemed to be surprised by the number of people and could not help but stop in his tracks. Bai Wei Wei found an opportunity, and her eyes fell on him. She said weakly, I didn't steal anything. His eyes were so pitiful that it made one's heart soften. Roth was slightly stunned, but before he could say anything, Jessie frowned in disgust. At this time, she was still using her delicate face to seduce others. Roth was her secret crush. How could this green tea bitch look at him with such a disgusting expression? Stealing is stealing. You still dare to quibble. A woman like you should get out of school. After saying that, Jessie angrily rushed forward. She raised her hand and ruthlessly slapped her face. Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned cold. Just as she was about to kick Jessie out of the way. One hand, cold as ice, white as bone. Just like that, it passed through Wei Wei Bai's back and squeezed Jessie's wrist. Jessie's expression changed. She was in so much pain that cold sweat broke out and her whole body trembled. Is at https://www.sashu.com// Chapter 924. Wei Wei Bai's body also stiffened. A hand hugged her waist, and she leaned against a hard and cold embrace from behind. Oh, you hit my people. Is this your so-called aristocratic demeanor? The man behind her had a deep and gorgeous voice. His cold breath brushed past Wei Wei Bai's ear. And Jessie was also ruthlessly thrown out by that hand. Jessie fell heavily to the ground and finally couldn't take it anymore and screamed. So dirty. The man behind her disdained. He opened his hand and gently touched Wei Wei Bai's delicate face. You're still clean. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. Was her face toilet paper? Didn't his conscience hurt by rubbing it like this? Why don't you tell them that I gave you the gem? The man behind her said in a cold tone. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, lowered her head, and didn't say anything. She even seemed to be resisting his hug. Let go of me. This is school. Arthur snorted indifferently and ridiculed her. He fiercely pressed her into his arms, bit her ear, and whispered to her in a low voice in front of everyone. "Why am I so shameful? Or is a blood servant with the status of a prince too lowly and not worthy of such an excellent and kind student like you?" He wandered around the castle in broad daylight and couldn't sleep at all. The little blood servant went to school. The castle, which used to be considered good, was suddenly worthless in his eyes. The little blood servant laid on the antique lounge chair and read a book. The little blood servant drank afternoon tea at the gorgeous little round table. And the bed, Arthur's face darkened. Why did he always think of Wei Bai when he saw everything? And he actually couldn't sleep. This was simply a disgrace to the vampires. He shouldn't have let her go to school. He should have just obediently stayed in the castle and had everything she wanted. It would be easy for him to open a school in the castle. And class had already ended. Why wasn't she back yet? If it weren't for the fact that the bats following her didn't act strangely, he would have thought that she had escaped. She was late on her first day of school. She should accept his punishment. Arthur immediately summoned his mount and excitedly went to the school, intending to personally bring her home. However, as soon as she landed, she heard that she had been framed for stealing gems. How could anyone bully her when he wasn't around? Furthermore, was it that difficult to say that the gem was his? As long as she revealed his identity, who would dare to offend her? Or was it because she still wanted to escape from him? Was that why she didn't dare to let others know that she was his blood slave? A dark and cold anger surged in his chest. Arthur looked at Wei Bai coldly. He wanted to see how long she could hold on. But in the end, she stood there silently and was beaten up. She was his woman, so he could do whatever he wanted. And other people's dirty hands were not qualified to touch a single strand of her hair. Arthur crushed the dirty woman's wrist. He grabbed Wei Bai's arm coldly. "Come home with me. It seems like you're not very popular in school. If you want to go to school, I'll hire a teacher for you." Then, without giving Wei Bai any chance to speak, he picked her up and left. When he walked to Jessie's side, he looked at her coldly. The stunningly handsome prince had red eyes. When he looked at people, it was as if he could steal their souls. His thin lips moved slightly. "The oath of a noble is too insignificant. How can a person like you swear in the name of a noble? Human nobles. They were all appointed by bloodlings." Arthur's light and gentle words destroyed Jessie's entire family. "Your family's honor has been stripped away. Everyone is expelled from the noble circle. / You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.